Whoops.
Wrong one.
I know. We'll see. It always like I've done that before because the little scenes like go cha-chunk down like that, and I always hit the wrong one. So I usually hit the one at the top, but it's not at the top. But hey, everybody. Sorry about that little sidetracks, little diversion there. All right, so I'm very excited. I can see you guys are very excited about this show too. I've been wanting to do this show like forever. I think maybe Zach, were you the one that recommended this one? Because I feel like you probably were, but it was like a long time ago.
50s rock and roll, man. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I know. That's what American Military said. He said, God, I love 50s rock and roll. Me too.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I have been, ever since I was a child, I was fascinated by it. I didn't know about the curse stuff until later. Like, I don't believe in curses, but we'll get into it. There was some pretty weird shit that like happened.
Jackson.
Like weird coincidences and stuff.
Horror wrestling fan, Military 100, they're all coming in.
But yeah, like so ever since the 70s when I was a kid, I think that I first became aware of the Crash from, you know, the Don McLean song American Pie, and which doesn't mention the Crash or Buddy Holly specifically.
Yeah.
But the song is dedicated to Buddy Holly, and Don McLean later said that the death of Buddy Holly, as well as the death of his own father, kind of inspired him to write the song. So the song's like not about Buddy Holly or not about the Crash necessarily, but it's kind of like just a larger cultural rumination, I guess, on like the end of an era.
It's about the day the music died.
And stuff like that. So yeah, so and because the song is called that, I kind of feel like maybe some people have the mistaken impression that newspapers like said at the time of the crash, which happened in 1959, that they called it that in the newspapers, but they didn't. That actually wasn't called that until the Don McLean song came out, which was 1971, 1972. So it was like a decade later.
Yeah, you wouldn't see it that way at the time. It was just a bunch of guys, rock and roll guys got killed. You wouldn't think it was the end of an era.
Yeah,
he was looking back on it like it was the end of an era.
Yeah, which it kind of was, like in a weird sort of way. Like I guess like the timing of it was so, and you know, because they had a decade after, you know, the 60s obviously, which was very turbulent. So they had a time to say like, oh, well, that was when it all started going crazy, you know what I mean?
50s music and 60s music, they were just worlds apart.
But the thing about it,
the 60s came out, man, it was all kinds of wild shit was happening. Shit, Hendrix was happening in the 60s.
That light is too bright still.
Is it?
Yeah. You got to turn it like all the way down.
It looks good.
I don't like it.
You're on camera, it looks good.
I think it's too bright, but because it got unplugged and like whenever you turn it back on, it goes to like maximum brightness.
There you go.
So,
see, now I'm in darkness.
That's you're not.
Yeah, I'm looking in here.
Not on my
I'm in darkness.
Not on my screen. Yeah. Well, if you want to turn it up brighter,
you look white, and I look like I'm in the darkness. See.
Well, if you want to turn it up higher, you can. It's just kind of distracting because it's like super bright.
There.
You know what I mean?
That's not that bad. You're just not used to it.
Yeah, I'm not. Like I said, I'm not used to all that light.
Now I'm as light as you. See. See.
Okay. So we'll just leave it at that.
You're a little bit whiter than me.
Yeah. Well, you went and got a tan because you've been out like mowing the lawn and shit.
Yeah.
He was out mowing the lawn and stuff. But yeah, so I've been fascinated.
I was chopping trees down.
Oh, that's right, chopping trees.
Yeah.
I thought. Well, I heard
mowed the lawn a couple days ago.
Oh, that's right. Well, that's what I was.
Yeah, I was out there cutting tree limbs and chopping tree limbs with chainsaw.
Yeah. And but yeah, so I feel like even though, well, and speaking of the 60s too, Buddy Holly, you know, it's kind of funny, I guess, because Buddy Holly gets like kind of all the, not accolades, but he's the one that's usually associated with the curse and with the plane crash, even though obviously Ritchie Valens was also killed and the Big Bopper was also killed and the pilot was also killed.
Yeah.
You know, nobody ever talks about that poor guy, but you know what I mean? So we will a little bit, but I think that's mainly just a product of, I don't know, I guess like one, how influential Buddy Holly was, because he was so influential to like so many, particularly the Beatles.
He was a rising star.
And like a lot, well, he had been around for a little while. Ritchie Valens was kind of up and coming.
Yeah.
The Big Bopper was kind of more, I mean, he had like Chantilly Lace, which was like huge hit, but it was kind of a novelty song. He was actually, he was a DJ, started out as, and he was a songwriter. He actually wrote some big hits for other artists. And he was a little bit older than the other ones. So I feel like Buddy Holly was easily the most, if you want to say, important as far as musical history goes, because he was first in a lot of ways. He was like first when he used a Stratocaster. He was like the first. They were the first to have like a 3-piece or your typical like rock and roll 4-piece band that you think of. He was kind of the first one to do this kind of music. Really, not like the first one, but he was like right on the forefront of that. I was just watching before we did the show. I was watching the Buddy Holly story, the movie with Gary Busey that came out in 1978. The Gary Busey was actually nominated for an Academy Award and a BAFTA, I believe. And I didn't get to watch the whole thing because it's long, but it's free on YouTube. And I didn't realize that Gary Busey can fucking sing. Holy cow. He did all his own singing live in the movie. And the guys that played the dudes in his band all played their own instruments live. Like they all learned how to play them. And he's great in it. Gary Busey is also a little part of the curse, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. He's considered one of the victims of the curse.
Victim of the curse.
Even though he's still alive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the movie is fairly accurate, but the thing about it is that the kind of music they were playing at the time was still very reviled as, quote unquote black music. So when white people were playing it, there was Elvis, but this was kind of like a little bit different. And there's a very funny scene in the movie. I'm not sure how accurate it is to real life, but they had a hit with That'll Be the Day without really knowing about it, because somebody like sent a demo to like a record company in New York, and they were like, oh, we thought we'd signed it, and they pressed and they put it out, and it started selling, and like, people really liked it. And so they got them there and they signed them and everything. And they got booked to play at the Apollo in Harlem, and the guy that booked them didn't realize that they were white. And he thought when he saw them, he was like, oh shit. You know what I mean? And so when they got on stage, there's a very funny scene where like the curtains open and it's just like a whole audience and they're all black. And so they're looking at it's like, what the fuck are these white people doing? Like, because white people had never played at the Apollo before. So then they were and they were kind of nervous, you know what I mean? Like the producer guy, or the guy that booked them, he was also white, but he's just like, oh my god, like these white dudes are gonna get lynched like out here in Harlem or whatever. But then of course they played and everybody thought they were amazing. So
they liked them. There was the
yeah. Like they played like 3 songs and by the end they were all like dancing and being like, fuck yeah, you know what I mean? Not fuck yeah, but you know what I mean. But it was just like a really funny scene. But I don't know how accurate that is to what really happened. But I think that happened a lot with a lot of rock musicians in the old days, like before people knew what they looked like. If you just heard the records, like I think there were some white bands that like people just assumed were black if you played rock and roll, because that was, like I said, it was seen as quote unquote black music. Like white people didn't play it. So I thought that was
I would have played it off to the audience. They booked us by accident.
Well, the funny thing was that
would have laughed.
Yeah, because Buddy Holly, Gary Busey as Buddy Holly, like he goes up to the microphone and he says, "We didn't expect y'all either," which I thought was very amusing. Yeah. I don't know if that's really what he said or not, but I thought that was like a pretty funny scene. But yeah, so I've been excited about doing this topic. There was a Coast to Coast AM that came out. It's George Norrie. And it came out, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago. And they had this woman on there. I can't remember her name, but I have it in my notes, like somewhere farther down, where she was talking about the curse. And she was talking about it, and I was like, man, a lot of that stuff kind of sounds like a reach. And some of it does sound like a reach, but there is like some pretty weird shit in there. So I do kind of want to talk about that. But we're going to do, I don't know, kind of like background. We're going to talk about the crash, like what caused the crash. Because I kind of feel like there's maybe still some misconceptions about that. Because like I said, the poor pilot gets blamed for it when it wasn't entirely his fault. You know what I mean? And, maybe kind of the larger cultural impact of it and all that other kind of stuff. And then we're going to talk about the curse and like all the weird deaths and shit like that happened in the ensuing years. Which, like I said, some of them, I don't believe in curses or anything, obviously. But some of them do seem like a little bit weird. You know what I mean? Zach says, I always used to assume the Bee Gees were black women as a kid. I could see that. Do you remember in the 80s when Rick Astley first came out and everyone thought he was black
Yeah, sound like a black guy. Yeah.
until they saw him on MTV and they're like, oh my God, he's a pasty, redheaded white man.
That was the original Rick Roll.
Maybe that's why that song got like...
Yeah.
I guess because...
Yeah,
I didn't really think about it one way or the other because I think the first time I heard that song was on MTV, so I saw him.
Yeah, sound like Barry White or something.
But I did think it was weird. I was like, man, look at that voice coming out of that skinny little white man.
Sound like Isaac Hayes or something. That's like
crazy.
That. Yeah.
And then I was like, is that really him singing? I was like, is this a Milli Vanilli situation?
Yeah.
You know,
a little skinny white kid.
I know. But it happens.
He had a good voice.
He did. You know what I mean? It's pretty fucking funny. Let me see. Elizabeth Jack says, the crash reminds me of what happened to Aaliyah. Yeah, she also died in a plane crash. A lot of musicians die in plane crashes. Well, I guess because they travel so much.
They're traveling all the time, yeah. And they're traveling on private planes sometimes. Those are kind of high risk.
Yeah, well, at least more high risk than like the big commercial jetliners, obviously. American Military says, there were many white artists who were welcomed enthusiastically by black audiences. Conversely, white kinds love some of the black singers, i.e. Little Richard. Yeah, that's right. Or Ray Charles or Chuck Berry. Yeah. I kind of think it was more like the older, like, you know, people that ran radio stations or signed records and stuff like that were kind of fuddy-duddies about it. I feel like the kids were just kind of like into it, you know what I mean? They didn't really care.
What always kind of surprised me is how much these 60s, 50s, and these 50s rock and roll guys, how much they influenced the UK. And that guys that were getting big in the 80s were constantly referring to 50s rock stars that were kind of forgotten in the United States. Like they would talk about Johnny Ray, and fucking, you know, he was kind of forgotten. What's the other one that Gene Vincent?
Although I don't feel like Gene Vincent was forgotten, but he's a tangential victim of the curse also, which we also get
kind of forgotten. And, you know, now some of them, you know, like Morrissey fucking evidently was like an Elvis fanatic. So was Billy Idol. But Morrissey was like doing Elvis covers and Roy Orbison covers. He evidently absolutely loved Roy Orbison, did a cover. Roy Orbison Jr., Orbison's son, said that he loved that cover and his dad would have loved it. And that Orbison Jr. was a Morrissey fan. Said, I love his lyrics and shit. And his hair.
I love his hair.
I love his lyrics and his hair. Yeah,
he did have great hair back in the day.
So it's just kind of funny that some of the biggest names in rock in the UK were kind of like second and third rung in the United States. You know, everybody knew who Elvis was. Everybody knew who Roy Orbison was.
Everybody in the fucking world knows who Elvis is.
Yeah, everybody knew who Buddy Holly was, pretty much. Fucking the one dude who fucking got busted for marrying his cousin, he kind of...
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis. Everybody knew who that guy was. Kind of infamous, really.
Big time.
But his music was cool, too, and he was...
Yeah, I really like Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, he was wild, man. Like, really.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Really a wild man. He was a fucking...
His music's fucking fantastic.
Crazy-ass Southern dude, yeah.
Yeah. Buddy Holly also Southern. He's from Texas.
Yeah, most of these dudes are Southern. The only one that wasn't would probably been like fucking... Well, shit, he wasn't a musician. I was thinking that I would no, rock and roll guys are almost all Southern. The first wave of them. The very first ones were black, but they all knew each other.
Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of why
James Brown. They all knew each other
because they were all like hanging out in the same scene.
They all go to the same clubs and they were listening to each other's music and stuff. And people don't realize it how close of friends Elvis and James Brown were. They were going to do a record, but you know they've been talking about it for years. And fucking at the Elvis's funeral, fucking Brown lost it. They gave him time with Elvis so he could say his goodbyes and shit, you know. And evidently he was fucking crying, talking about the record they were going to make together and shit. Just, you know,
that's a bummer.
They were evidently pretty tight. Kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, well, not really. It's just
know. But you know, fucking Elvis was kind of smooth and fucking and James was kind of rough, you know.
Yeah.
Or that was just his stage presence, though. I think. I don't think they said he was a real disciplinarian, real strict, and real professional. in his professional life. You know, I don't know. Just kind of funny that their personalities seem very different, but evidently they liked each other.
Well, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? American Military said, I saw Chuck Berry live when he came to my college, sponsored by MTV's Campus Invasion Tour. Damn. Even in his 70s, he could still rock. Yeah, I bet. Zach said, I think I suggested a show about the rock and roll groupies once. Yeah, you did. That would be a fun as fuck topic. Yeah, I agree. It is on the list. I put it in the poll, I think, one time, but it didn't win. But it's still there, so it's going back in the rotation. But yeah, I think probably because rock and roll sort of came from rhythm and blues, and a lot of that was, blues that was very southern
Mississippi
kind of
Delta.
thing. Yeah, so it's like, so that makes sense that's where a lot of the early rock music came from. And it's just funny. Like I said, I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 50s. I'm old, but I'm not that old. So so I don't know how accurate like some of the media that shows how horrified parents and older authority figures in the 50s were by rock and roll.
Yeah, they were.
The impression I always got was it was almost kind of like the 80s with the Satanic Panic kind of thing, where it's just kind of like any rock and roll. Well, shit, even by the time of the 80s, they were still talking about rock and roll being the devil's music. They were still talking about like fucking Led Zeppelin and shit like that.
My grandparents' generation hated rock and roll music.
It's so good though. Like, why that lame ass shit they listen to? It's just
they were Southern. They were from Mississippi.
Like nowadays,
on my dad's side. And
listen to a fucking Buddy Holly record and then listen to like a Lawrence Welk record. Which one is better?
They thought rock and roll music was childish and like crass, tasteless. Jumping around.
It can be.
That it was black. It was very black. It wasn't something white people or respectable people were supposed to listen to. Playing that or listening to that. You weren't supposed to let your daughter listen to that, and they're playing it on the radio.
Or she might be a hoe.
Yeah, because that'll encourage them to drink and party and fuck. But they were doing that.
They were doing that anyway.
They were already doing all of it.
They didn't need rock and roll to do that.
The South, even back in those days, was not fucking repressed. It was, you go back and you go back and read what historians who really fucking know that it was considered to be oversexed, undereducated, and violent. That's how the North saw the South.
That's how old people have been talking about young people for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Every generation says the same shit.
And in the Mississippi Delta era, Louisiana, Alabama, the older blues guys, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and all the guys that went back, it's even the older stuff. One of the first goth sounding fucking songs, I Put a Spell on You. It's like something out of them, New Orleans, voodoo. It's the genesis of rock. And it was very black, blues was. And everybody was listening to it on the radio. And white kids were listening to it on the radio. And they were going, man, I want to play music like that. And
why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and
it's cool as shit.
That was Elvis's generation. They were listening to that. They were young when that was coming up. And they just played that kind of music. And the only place you could play it, was in black kind of clubs. But then because you were white, and you did have some promoters and record companies, local record companies were backing you. They were getting you on the radio, and you were getting live shows. They were local. You were kind of a novelty, but the young girls liked it. Especially when Elvis showed up, that was like the okay. Like, okay, the culture was kind of changing, I mean, when they had him, I think it was on Ed Sullivan, when he first made his appearance, they kind of blocked out some of his fucking dance from the lower body.
Well, yeah, they couldn't show his hips.
You look at it now, it's just normal. He's just dancing normal. And and all the girls loved it. Elvis was extremely good looking. He sounded good. And it was funny, Ed Sullivan had to tell everybody, look, he is a fine boy. Like he had to fucking tell everybody. There's
he gave all the old farts.
He's a
permission.
fine boy. He's good.
You can like him. He's okay. Yeah. He's a nice person.
Yeah, he's a nice person. You can like him. And that really kind of gave
it. Degenerate.
That kind of. I met him and he's a fine boy. So that kind of because everything was kind of tainted. If you didn't conform, you were bad. That was the thinking of the 50s. If you weren't a conformist, you were bad.
There's a scene, the opening scene of the Buddy Holly story, the movie, is actually before Buddy and the Crickets were even called that, and before they got famous. They're playing at like a roller rink in Lubbock, Texas, which is where they're from, and they were playing country music, which was what they were supposed to play, and it was a radio show that went out on the radio every week. And so they played a country song, and everyone was like, "What's this shit?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you would. And so then they're like, "Well, let's play some of our own songs." So they start playing like good shit. You know what I mean? Like rock and roll. And like the guy that's doing the radio show is like, "Oh shit, they're not supposed to be playing this." And then like people are calling and complaining, and they're like, their sponsors are gonna pull their shit off the show and everything like that. So yeah, again, I don't know how historically accurate that was, but that was the kind of shit that was going on. I think that Buddy Holly kind of got away with a little bit more too, because of how he looked. He looked very
harmless.
Yeah,
he looked very
like
harmless.
he was very thin, and he had the glasses, and he just looked respectable. Like he didn't have a leather jacket on or nothing, and he didn't do like all sexy moves or nothing like that. Like he looked like a nice man.
Yeah, Elvis kind of had a bad boy image, but he was acceptable. If you were a girl, your mom would go, "Yeah, he's pretty hot." Your mom would kind of understand.
Yeah.
Why you as a girl were looking at him. The guy who was really bad was Jerry Lee Lewis. He was bad.
That dude was.
But he was good too.
I mean,
he was good, but that motherfucker was naughty.
He was a nutcase.
Yeah, nut. And then another one would have been
great fucking songs though.
Another one that was just out there was like Little Richard, because Little Richard is. I don't understand how you could not see that Little Richard is flamboyantly gay and pretty out.
But yeah, he got away with it.
He got away with it. Yeah.
Crazily.
Crazy as a motherfucker.
I know. Sometimes I see that shit back and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and he had a huge fan base.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
he really got away with some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We gotta do a show on him one of these days.
Yeah.
They said he would just stay in his car and crack the window, and fans would come up and he'd talk to you through the little crack in the window. That was it. He wouldn't mix with the public at all. He was scared.
Well, I can't say I blame him.
I don't blame him either, yeah.
Honestly.
Some dudes would just fucking jump him and beat him up.
Especially back in those days.
Back in those days, yeah.
Yeah, probably like, gotta keep your fucking, keep yourself
safe.
He
had balls.
Yeah. John Gore said Carl Perkins was pretty nuts too. Yeah, I heard. Yeah. TSU Joy says, I'm from the Mississippi Delta. This is true about the blues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think,
I'm from Mississippi also.
Yeah. Laurel, Mississippi.
Yeah, so my family's been there for generations.
Just like on that hometown show.
Yep.
That's where he's.
I could recognize those houses. I know that house.
I know that was what hilarious about watching that series. He's like, "Hey, that's so and so's house."
Peggy Key's house. Say the Key residence.
I know where that is.
Yeah, it's in that house.
That's like pretty fucking funny. All right, so like I said, I don't know. This might range all over the place, but I do have like a timeline. So we'll talk a little bit about. I mean, it's not going to be necessarily like a biography show about Buddy Holly or the Big Bopper or Ritchie Valens or anything like that. We're mostly talking about what happened, like the circumstances surrounding the crash, and then the weird shit that happened like after the crash. But we'll do like a little bit of background, I guess, before we get into that. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Or do you have something else that you would like to add?
No, that's it.
Before we get into it. Okay. So out of all three of these iconic musicians that died tragically in February of 1959, at the time of their deaths, I feel like because Buddy Holly gets the most, press out of all of them, I guess, because he was already the most important one, and he was certainly the most influential, like I said. Now, his actual name is Charles Hardin Holly, EY. They actually, I think when they put out his first record, they left the E out, so they were just like, oh, well, that's your name now. You know what I mean? Just, you don't need the E in Holly. But he had been called Buddy, like, pretty much his whole life. So that's what he went by. And he actually grew up around country music and playing country music quite a bit. But, when Elvis came out, he got really into rhythm and blues and started playing that. Now, so by the time the late 1950s had come around, like, obviously Holly and his band, which, he eventually named the Crickets, had, like, a whole bunch of hits. That'll Be the Day, Peggy Sue, Oh Boy, which is like stuck in my head now because I was watching Gary Busey sing it in the movie just now, and Rave On, which is also a great song. And like I said, he was super, super, even though he was he'd been around for a couple of years, I feel like, before he died. So he was, his career was very brief, but his influence was enormous. He was actually one of the main figures that established what would become like kind of the basic template of like rock music going forward. Musicians who wrote their own material, which prior to around this time in the 50s, that a songwriter and a performer were two different things. You didn't really have bands that, wrote their own music. Like
Yeah.
it was kind of, I don't think it was unheard of, but it was really, really unusual.
It went on for a long time though.
It did, yeah.
Even in the 80s and 90s.
It did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think now the expectation is if you're a band that you write at least some of your own music.
Yeah. And before we get too deep in this, yes, rock music came from Mississippi Delta blues, which was black. Some of the very first rock and roll was pretty black, and then the white guys got involved. So you could say, some people would say, well, black people invented rock and roll. Kinda. Thing is Mississippi Delta blues was actually a spin-off of what do you call it? Bluegrass music, which was it's southern music, went up to Appalachia. It was almost kind of like the American version of Scottish folk music. It has a very Scottish folk music roots to it. Same instruments and everything. So Mississippi Delta blues and rock and roll were not that different from bluegrass. It's just slowed down. And of course, the topics were what they're talking about is a little grittier, a little more realistic. They're talking about how much shit sucks. They also straight up talk about sex. The devil's going to get your woman, and I might be the devil. That type of shit. The occult. It was in Mississippi Delta blues because there's a religious background there, and on the wrong side of the tracks, you might be committing crimes. Yeah, you believe in God, but you're being chased and tempted by the devil. So all that's in there, which ended up going into rock and roll and metal music. It's funny. It's just it was Southern and it was American. They all kind of had a same common DNA because they were all coming from the same place and the same culture. It was just Southern culture. So I don't know. That's just my take on it. But knowing how it went down.
Yeah. So like I said, so the template that we realize, nowadays as rock and roll with kind of it's technically like a 4-piece band. You got a guitar, got a bass, got a singer, got drums. That wasn't really a thing. And like I said, he was also very adamant that he wanted to write his own songs and produce his own records, which was something that really was not done, like hardly ever. He was very, very insistent that they all write their own stuff. Whereas like even Elvis, I mean, Elvis was a thing like before Buddy Holly, but Elvis didn't write his own songs. Like he performed other people's songs. He was more like a performer, right? I think he did co-write a few things, but he mostly did, he did like covers of blues songs and stuff like that, but that was acceptable. That's what rock and roll, that's what you did.
That's what you did, yeah.
A lot of them just did
Elvis
covers.
Elvis bought his songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was open about it.
But like I said, it was very expected.
Yeah.
Like I said, performers and songwriters were two different things.
He'd brag about who was writing him a song.
Yeah.
He wasn't hiding the fact. Yeah, he's writing a song for me. It's going to be great. That kind of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
normal.
So I think that Buddy Holly was kind of a trailblazer in the sense that he insisted on writing his own songs and producing his own records. Like he wanted complete control over his music, which again, musicians didn't really get like back in the day. But because he'd had like because he had big hits, they kind of let him do it.
Well, musicians came out of bands, and the bands came out of high school. They gave you sheet music. It was somebody else's music you were playing.
Yeah.
And then you performed other people's music. You weren't expected to write your own.
Yeah.
You weren't an artist that way.
Yeah.
But Buddy Holly is becoming a modern artist.
Yeah, so I kind of feel like he was the first modern rock music, rock musician.
Yeah.
Like in the sense that he had his own band, he wrote his own songs, he produced his own material.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is what we expect nowadays, but back then that was not the case.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, I think that because he had an image unlike a lot of, because rock and roll was seen as kind of a little bit, degenerate. But because he looked so, he looked like the kid from your math class, you know what I mean? Like he didn't really look like a greaser or anything like that. So I think that kind of helped his appeal also because he just looked like a normal guy. So, so he actually married pretty early, which I guess a lot of them did back then, because, he was only 22 when he died. His wife, Maria Elena Santiago, she actually worked at the record company that signed him, I believe. And I think he proposed marriage on their first date or something like that. Like they'd only known each other for a little while. Sadly, spoiler alert, she was pregnant when he died. I believe she was 6 months pregnant. So yeah. Now, so when so I feel like he'd had like a few really big hits. And then his wife got pregnant, and then he wasn't like on the downward slope necessarily, but he hadn't had, a big hit like in a few months. You know what I mean? So he needed some money. And it so happened that they were putting together this tour through the Midwest called the Winter Dance Party. I don't know why they couldn't come up with a better name than that. And they were going to do it in the beginning of 1959, and they asked him to headline it. And because he needed the money, because his wife was pregnant, and like I said, he hadn't had a hit record in a few months, he's just like, okay, I'll go on there. So he gets a new backing band, because he'd had the band The Crickets before, but he gets a new backing band to go on this tour. And this band consisted of a guitarist named Tommy Alsop, a bassist, Waylon Jennings. Yes, that Waylon Jennings. He was not famous at the time, but obviously he would be very famous later on. And a drummer named Carl Bunch. So the other two people in this, well, like I said, we'll talk about the pilot too, because I feel like he gets left out a little bit, but you know what I mean. Ritchie Valens, who, if you were around in the 80s, holy crap, in 1987, that movie La Bamba came out.
Oh, it's fucking everywhere.
With Lou Diamond Phillips playing Ritchie Valens. I must have seen that movie 40,000 times. Yeah. And Reyes like Los Lobos did a cover of La Bamba, like and that like got really big in the charts and everything like that. What a sad fucking movie. And then I was thinking, they made the Gary Busey movie, like the Buddy Holly story, and then they made La Bamba in 1987. Why doesn't anybody make a movie about the Big Bopper? Maybe makes a movie about the Big Bopper.
He wasn't as photogenic,
I guess. I was watching this documentary that was
probably would have made a pretty good movie though.
I would watch it.
Yeah.
The thing about it, I was watching this like quite old like documentary. It must have been on TV because somebody put it on YouTube and it looked like it was taken off like a VHS tape because it was 4:5 aspect ratio, and they had the Big Bopper's son on there, and he did like for a long time. Like this documentary is like super old, so I don't know if he's still doing this. But for a while, he did like a Big Bopper tribute show. Man, he was the spitting image of his dad too. Fucking crazy. But yeah, so Ritchie Valens, at the time of the crash, was just like a real up and coming. Like he had some big hits, but he'd only really been around for like a few months. Really, he was only 17 years old.
He was a new thing, man. He was Mexican American in rock and roll.
Yeah, which again, huge hit. Very unusual. Like I'm not saying that there
weren't. He looked good too. So
I'm not saying that there weren't like Latino acts and everything like that, but they would usually like whitewash them a bit, or it was kind of like not really, they didn't really make their ethnicity, I guess, like part of the package. And his real last name is Valenzuela. Yeah. So they shortened it obviously so he wouldn't sound quite so Mexican, I guess.
And his biggest hit fucking was in Spanish.
Yeah, which, like I
So,
said, was kind of
yeah.
unheard of. And the crazy thing
Everybody
about
loved it.
that, well, the first song that was real big hit for him was "Come On, Let's Go," which is also a great song. And then he did like a slow one called "Donna," which is about his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then I think the flip side, like the B side, for all you young people that don't know what that means,
Yeah,
the other
out.
side of the record, like the single, which was not the hit, it was just usually some throwaway
Filler.
song or some filler song, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had done a version of La Bamba, which is, kind of a classic Mexican, like there had been like lots and lots of versions of it. And he decided to do a version of it for the flip side of either Donna or Come On, Let's Go, I don't remember. And some radio station DJs really liked it and started playing it and became like a huge, huge hit.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was kind of unheard of for there to be like a big hit that was in Spanish.
Yeah, in Spanish, yeah.
Yeah, so that was like a big, huge.
And there's no way
deal.
you could do that song in English. It would not be the same fucking song. It sounds great in Spanish. Just roll with that, and it was a hit.
Yeah, it's funny because I kind of got in for a little while, like a couple years back. We got into like this thing where we were listening to all these Mexican bands that did like covers of Smiths and Morrissey songs because holy crap, they love the Smiths and Morrissey
in Spanish
in Mexico.
Yeah.
And they did some Spanish versions like of Every Day's Like Sunday and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really good.
Pretty
like
good,
whoever did the translation, because sometimes it doesn't translate as well because the syllables might be different and it might not work out the same.
Mexracy.
Yeah.
Mexracy. They're good, yeah.
But I really liked their version of Every Day. I was like, wow, they really they translated that really well, so it still sounds good, like in Spanish, like they didn't.
Mexracy was a side project that some Mexican musicians did on the side. They had another band, but they put out a lot of videos. Yeah, it's good. Morrissey covers in mariachi.
I think they sing in English sometimes too.
Some of it's English, some of it's.
But some of it they also do Spanish language versions, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And like I said, they all sound really good.
Yeah.
Like whoever does the translation from one to the other, because you probably have to finagle it a little bit, like to get it to sound right. But yeah, so he'd only been around for a few months, but like I said, he was definitely, who knows what he would have gone on to do
big.
if he hadn't died sadly, like at fucking 17, which is fucking horrifying.
No, he'd have been around until the 70s.
Oh, I imagine.
Easily.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
And
maybe 80s.
And like I said, the thing about Buddy Holly too is that he was only 22 when he died, and he was already that influential at that young age.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine like what he would have gone on to do as well. And then there was the Big Bopper. His real name, actually, that wasn't his real name, obviously. His name was Giles Perry Richardson Jr. And he was a little bit older than the others. He was 28. And he had actually been a radio DJ in Texas. And then he decided, well, he saw how popular like different novelty songs were, like Purple People Eater and stuff like that. And Witch Doctor, if you remember that one, like it was the Chipmunks, wasn't it? I remember that. And so they were really popular. So he's like, well, I could probably do that. So he did a song called Chantilly Lace, which is essentially like it's a phone call. Like he's calling his girlfriend, like saying kind of flirty shit, you know what I mean? And then it's kind of set to music. So it's kind of a goofy, like a novelty song, but it was a huge, huge, huge hit. Yeah. So I think that's kind of mainly what he's known for. But what I think a lot of people don't know is that he was also quite an accomplished songwriter. He wrote the song White Lightning, which was a big hit for George Jones, like the country music star. And he wrote a song called Running Bear, which Johnny Preston had done and, also was a big hit. So, so he wasn't just that guy that did that one novelty song with the phone call, you know what I mean? So, I wanted to say that.
For our British and foreign audience, White Lightning is moonshine.
It is.
Yeah, which is pure, damn near pure sugarcane, damn near pure corn alcohol. Yeah. You can actually make it out of anything, but yeah, moonshine.
Oracle says, I've heard it said that a lot of early rock and roll was about getting laid or dying tragically while trying to get laid.
Yeah.
But Buddy Holly sang about love and romance. He did, yeah. I mean, some of the other rockers did too, but I feel like, that's true.
The blues was about that, though, too.
Yeah. Oracle also said, as a reminder, the Colonel tried to get the rights to Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You, But she didn't like the idea that Elvis would get such a big percentage and kept the song rights. She's like, I don't want Elvis doing it. He's going to get all that money. Oracle also said Maria Elena, who was Buddy Holly's wife, her miscarriage changed how we announce celebrity deaths, by the way. That's true. She learned of his death from a radio broadcast. They didn't tell her like before, so she found out on the radio, and she had a miscarriage. She lost her baby. So yeah. So after that, Oracle says, the custom was to not release the news of a famous person's death until the next of kin had been notified privately. Yeah, you'd think that wouldn't have to be a thing, and that wouldn't have had to happen to her, because that's fucking horrible. But yeah, I guess they didn't think about it at the time. Oracle also says Jack Black would make an interesting Big Bopper. He would, I think he would be good at that. We got a super chat from Backseat Driver. Thank you very much. Cool stream. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Like I said, I'm very excited about doing this topic, if you can't tell. John Gore said, didn't Dennis Quaid portray Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire? Yes, he did. And Winona Ryder, I believe, played his 13-year-old cousin that he married. I remember that being a really good movie. I think I saw it in the theater, because I've always really liked Jerry Lee Lewis. And I remember it being really good. I haven't seen it in a long time, though. But I don't think Dennis Quaid like sang. Did he? I don't remember. The reason I was so impressed with the Buddy Holly story with Gary Busey in it was because Gary Busey did all his own singing, and all the other guys that played the band like did their own playing, and they did it live also, like while they were shooting the movie.
Kurt Russell did a great Elvis.
That's right, and that was John Carpenter.
John Carpenter movie.
John Carpenter made an Elvis movie with Kurt Russell.
I think he sang a lot of that.
It's always going to be better because you can tell, even when they do their own singing and they dub it in later, you can still tell because it never matches up quite. So when you watch, because I was watching, because this kind of nerd I am, because I was watching the Buddy Holly story like really closely, and like so when Gary Busey's singing, like his head dips down like that and his voice gets quieter because he's not in the microphone, so he's like singing live. You can really tell that he's like singing, and he sounds great. But it sounds really good. So I don't remember if Dennis Quaid sang in Great Balls of Fire. Now I'm gonna have to go look. I haven't seen that movie in like a really long time, but that is a really good movie.
Do they have one about Roy Orbison?
You know what? I don't know.
Because
I would be shocked if they didn't, but I can't think of one offhand.
The original OG goth, the original goth.
Like I said, somebody needs to make a Roy Orbison movie.
Yeah.
Like I know there's documentaries about him. But I don't know if there's like a fictional movie.
Yeah, I don't know how much of him is legend.
And how that might be fun too.
Yeah.
I mean, because when they make a biopic, they're always going to like exaggerate.
There was a lot of legend about him, that his wife and his baby died in a fire or something, and a lot of the songs that he wrote were about them. So whenever he'd sing them, he'd start crying. So he had to wear black glasses, and he wore black all the time. And
he wore black on the outside because black is how he feels on the inside.
Later on, he was in the hotel with the Rolling Stones, and he got into the fucking hot tub with fucking Rolling Stones. And Mick Jagger said that he's a fine figure of a man, fucking, because he making fun of how he was built, because Roy Orbison was a funny built motherfucker.
Hey,
he said he was a fine specimen of a man, teasing him and shit.
We can't all look like
Mick
rock
Jagger.
Stars. You can't all look like.
No, they liked him though. They got along.
Well, yeah,
I would think
so.
But yeah, I always liked Orbison. I always liked his voice.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and fucking Glenn Danzig ripping off Orbison a lot.
Oh, yeah, like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
Well, when he's not ripping off Elvis.
Yeah, it was. Well, Elvis was ripping off Orbison though too.
That's true.
Sometimes I saw an interview sometime in the 70s or 60s, maybe late 60s, and one of the TV guys says, "How does it feel to be the king of rock and roll?" And he goes, "I'm not the king of rock and roll." And he goes, "Well, if you're not the king of rock and roll, who is?" He goes, "Roy Orbison is the king of rock and roll." And he was serious.
Yeah. I like that he said that.
Yeah, he said Roy Orbison is the king of rock and roll.
Respect to the king. There you go.
Yeah. I thought
that
was cool.
Yeah. All right. So they put this tour together. Those three weren't the only bands on it, but they were kind of like the best known ones, I guess, like at the time. And like I said, Buddy Holly was the headliner. So as I mentioned, This tour is called the Winter Dance Party, and wow, like so much has been written about what a fucking shit show this tour was. I don't know who planned this shit, but I hope they got fired. Um, because Winter Dance Party. So it happens in January and February in the Midwest when it is, checks notes, cold as fucking balls. It's like 30 below. And they're like going back and forth. Nobody, and okay, so you know when you do like a rock and roll tour generally, and usually the itinerary would make some fucking sense, right? Like you go to this city and then you go to this city and then you go to, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, this tour, it's like they'd go to one city and then they'd back up and go to the city and then go back. It made no sense like whatsoever. So sometimes they're like, you know, hours and hours and hours in these fucking buses, and the buses kept breaking down. The buses had no heat. It was just a miserable experience for all involved. You know what I mean? And so it was over like 3 states. It was Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. And so yeah, so they're all on this bus and they're all freezing their fucking balls off. And it was just awful. And Carl Bunch, who was Buddy Holly's drummer, he got frostbite on his feet and they had to put him in the hospital. So he couldn't do some of the dates. Like some of the other musicians would have to like you know, take turns like playing drums for Buddy Holly because he had to go because he didn't want to like lose his toes. You know what I mean? That's how fucking cold this bus was.
Damn, frostbite on the fucking bus.
Yeah, because like
Jesus
I said, the heat
Christ.
kept breaking.
Right.
And I don't even know because I saw some like documentaries that I got the impression that they like one bus would break down and then they'd bring them another bus and then they'd go back and forth because like I said, these are horrible like winter conditions. It's like feet and feet of snow and sleet, and it's just like I said, it's fucking 30 below, and they're traveling miles and miles and miles on these lonely highways, and so the buses kept breaking down. So I don't know if it was the same one that kept breaking down, or if they just kept bringing them new ones and they just couldn't take the weather. And so it was like, and like I said, and the heat wasn't working, obviously, and they're all crammed in this bus. You know, they couldn't, you know, they didn't have time to like wash their clothes or anything like that. It was just like a fucking nightmare. They all said it was. Well, I saw interviews with Waylon Jennings, you know, many years later, because he was on this tour. Obviously, he was in Buddy Holly's band at the time, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute because he's kind of instrumental to this whole thing. But yeah, he was just like it was hell. He's like it was just the worst shit ever. It was we were just all freezing and miserable, and it was terrible.
He must
and
have had some
tired.
fucked up shoes, those little fucking
Yeah.
dress shoes, and little skinny socks. That's the only way. Got it.
Well, and I kind of wonder too if, you know, Big Bopper and Buddy Holly and them, I mean, they were from Texas. Ritchie Valens was from California.
Yeah, they weren't used to
And so they probably had no idea. They're like, how cold can it be?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And then they're like, oh,
They
man.
didn't have the right clothes, yeah.
What the fuck is this?
Yep.
It's like the fucking tundra.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's cold in the fucking Midwest in January, February.
The Southwest.
Like, it's not funny. It's like fucking Siberia out there.
Yeah.
So yeah. So they had been going back and forth on this tour. They're worn out, they're exhausted, they're dirty, they're freezing, and they're just really not having a good time. Now on February 2nd, 1959, the tour arrives in Clear Lake, Iowa. And they're going to play at the Surf Ballroom, which is still there, by the way. And at the time, it was actually one of the, I don't know if it was one of the most, but it was a pretty big like venue in the Midwest. It was a really, really big ballroom, had a big dance floor, and it had been open. I think it burned down once and then they rebuilt it like in the late 40s. And so they've been having shows there since then. So this show on February 2nd, that night, Buddy Holly was headlining. Then you had Ritchie Valens, you had the Big Bopper, Dion and the Belmonts were also playing, and Frankie Sardo. And they think that about, like from the ticket receipts and stuff, that there were about 1,100 people like in the audience, which that's a pretty good crowd, like for the Midwest when it's 30 below. Like all those people came out to see them. So yeah, this would end up being the most famous concert ever held there, but not for good reasons. I mean, it was a good show, obviously. But, you know, at the time, nobody realized what was going to happen just like hours after. So now the show has kind of taken on this weird, like, mythic significance. You know what I mean? Because I'm always kind of fascinated by that kind of shit where, oh, we played this big show. Oh, yay, blah, blah, blah. And then like hours later, they're dead. And it's just kind of like, that's so freaky. And sometimes if there's, like footage of that last show and you're just like looking at them going, man, they're going to be dead in 2 hours and they don't even know, like, oh, that's so freaky to me. So I kind of feel like there's not footage of that show, I don't think, but that's the kind of shit I think about, that it's like, because we know that they're going to be dead, but they don't know. So they did the show and it was great and everything like that. So the next stop on the tour was Moorhead, Minnesota. So they were all going to get on the bus and go to Moorhead, Minnesota, which was like some super long, it was like fucking hours and hours. I don't even remember how many hours it is. So Buddy Holly, at this point, he's basically like, probably not in these words, but fuck this shit. He's like, I'm sick of this bus. I got all these dirty clothes. I don't have anywhere to do my laundry. I'm sick of freezing my ass off on this bus. So he decides that he's going to pay to charter a plane, like a little plane, for him and the two guys in his band. And it was, I think, $36. Because I was curious to see how much, because I saw a documentary and they were like, it was $36 a person. And I was like, it doesn't sound like much nowadays. I was like, wow, cheap. But back then, I looked it up. That would be $413 per person. So that makes sense. So he calls up this place called Dwyer Flying Service at Mason City Municipal Airport. And he was planning on him and the two members of his band to fly to Fargo in North Dakota, which was the closest convenient airport to Moorhead, Minnesota, which is where the next tour date was. And from there, they hoped, like, they would land, they could get there well ahead of the bus, because it would only take a couple hours. I don't even think it'd take a couple hours to fly there, but the bus was going to take several hours. So it's like, we'll get there ahead, we can get some rest, we can get the hotel, we'll have some time to find a laundromat, we can, wash all our clothes because they're standing up on their own, and, just take care of some basic shit, like get some sleep. So you understand why he would do that. Unfortunately, this decision would have resonance throughout like music history. Although, of course, they didn't know that at the time. So this was a 4-seater plane, meaning the pilot, that was 1 seat, and then it was room for 3 passengers. Now, the most widely accepted account of what happened is that Buddy was going to fly with his 2 band members, who were Waylon Jennings and Tommy Allsup. Now, neither of them was famous yet. Waylon Jennings was only 21 years old at the time. Eventually, obviously, he would become pretty much one of the most famous, figures in outlaw country music. And Tommy Allsup would actually later go on to become a respected guitarist and record producer. So those were the 2 that were supposed to get on the airplane. Neither one of them got on the airplane for kind of interesting reasons. So the Big Bopper had actually gotten sick on the tour. Actually, a lot of people got sick on this tour because, like I said, the conditions were not fantastic. I don't know if anybody knows exactly what was wrong with it, but they said it was like a really bad flu is what it seemed like. And I don't know if he was kind of like, man, I don't think I can be on that bus anymore, or if Waylon Jennings saw him suffering and was like, man, that dude can't go on the bus. So Waylon Jennings very nicely offered his place on the plane to the Big Bopper. He's like, the bus sucks, but I'm tough. You're very ill. You need to get some rest or whatever. And so out of the goodness of his heart, not knowing what would happen, obviously, he gave the Big Bopper his seat on the plane. So that's the Big Bopper. And then Tommy Allsup's seat. Now, Ritchie Valens was also sick of the bus. And he says to Tommy, I'll flip you for the plane seat. Like, I'll flip a coin. And the coin was tossed. Ritchie Valens won the coin toss. And I feel like that has become, and that really did happen. That I know it sounds like some shit they added later, like it's like part of the legend or something. But no, that really did happen. Like, people that were there, even the one guy that was there, he was just like, it was my coin. It was a 50-cent piece. And he gave it to him. And so I feel like that's kind of part of the mythology now, but that really did happen. And this part I'm not sure is true. They did put this in the La Bamba movie. But after Ritchie Valens wins the coin toss, he says something to the effect of, "Oh, that's the first thing I've ever won in my life," or something like that. I don't know if he really said that, because holy crap, that would be like really creepy if he really did say that. I don't know if he really said that, but according to some accounts, he did say that, like after the coin flipped. Because obviously we know what happened. Tommy Alsop, who lost the coin toss, actually lived for another 58 years. So just goes to show one fucking coin toss, how that can fucking work. There's also like a little bit, because obviously because this was such an iconic event, there's like a lot of differing, like, and it was a long time ago, so like a lot of people that were there, like their memories aren't quite sure. Now Dion DiMucci of Dion and the Belmonts, he said that they had also asked him if he wanted to go on the plane. But when they told him it was $36 a person, he's like, nah, man, that's like too much money. And so he opted to stay on the bus. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how he remembers it anyway. And now, poor Waylon Jennings, man. So evidently, Waylon Jennings and Buddy Holly, I mean, they were good buds, right? And Waylon said, like I saw on an interview, he's like, me and Buddy Holly, we used to like, give each other shit, you know what I mean? Like friends do. They were just kind of, fucking with each other, joking with each other or whatever. And so Buddy Holly kind of teased him about giving up his seat on the plane to the Big Bopper. And, and so Holly says, so, Waylon's like, yeah, I got to go back on the bus or whatever. Yeah, it sucks. And Buddy Holly says, well, I hope your old bus freezes up again, like joking. And then Waylon Jennings, in return, says, well, I hope your old plane crashes. And he really did say that.
Yeah, he admitted saying that.
Oh, and that fucked him up for decades. Yeah. I understand. I can't imagine like fucking saying that to somebody, just joking. They were just joking. I mean, Buddy Holly said, oh, I hope your bus freezes up again, because it had been. Yeah. because you got to go on the bus, hardy har. He's like, well, I hope your plane crashes. Yeah. And then it did. Oh, yeah. I would be so fucked up. I saw one documentary that kind of said that was kind of the impetus for Waylon Jennings, like all his drug problems and stuff like that later. I don't know if I'd go that far, but he has said, even when he was older, that he's like, man, that fucked me up for a long time that I said that. He's like, obviously he didn't think he did it. Like, he doesn't think that because I said that, like, it was supernaturally, like, brought it into being or some shit like that. But it's like having that be the last thing that you say to somebody and then they die in the exact way that you said. I mean, I don't think I would ever get over that, to be honest. And it took him a really long time. I don't think he ever really did get over it.
Yeah, and saying, I hope your plane crashes, kind of blames the plane. Wasn't the plane's fault, man. The fucking pilot crashed the plane.
And it wasn't, well, it was the pilot's fault, but not entirely. There was like a lot. I think the pilot's gotten a lot of shit over the years.
There wasn't anything wrong with the plane,
though. But yeah, that's true. There wasn't anything.
Anything wrong with the plane.
It was pilot error, but there were mitigating circumstances, which we'll get into. Because I do kind of feel like that poor kid. I mean, because the pilot was only 21, also. Yeah. And I feel like that poor kid got a lot.
As soon as I saw the crash site, I knew exactly what happened. Yeah. And the expert came over there, but we'll save it for the time. But fucking, it's a real common problem with aircraft. Yeah. Yeah. Well, pilots flying aircraft when they're flying by instruments.
There was a great, there's actually a great, what the hell is the name of the channel? Pilot, damn, now I can't remember. But it's a guy who's a pilot, and he has a whole YouTube channel, Pilot Break Now, shit, I can't remember what it's called, I'll probably remember it later. But he does a whole YouTube channel about, like, famous plane crashes and, like, what happened. And so I watched the one about this plane crash.
See, my first important job was being airborne infantry in the 101st Airborne Division. So I was flying, being delivered into combat on a rotor wing aircraft known as a fucking helicopter. And we were on some badass helicopter flights. So we all kind of knew the problems with aircraft, especially with rotor wing, man. Like we were flying so low, nap of the earth, that fucking the rotors would go into fucking trees, fucking knocking limbs down in Korea. It was wild, man. And they're flying with night vision goggles. And there's no depth of perception. And they're flying in formation. Pulling negative G's with the doors open in fucking cold weather at night. with fucking weapons strapped to you. You feel like you're being sucked out the fucking door because the doors are open. It's wild. So I have a very good awareness on aircraft. I could fly. I've flown computer simulators, so I know, stall speeds and shit like that. In general, I think I could fly aircraft. I could land one. Now I don't know if I could land it in one piece.
Well, that's kind of important.
That's the hard, but a lot of people with no training at all and no awareness at all have landed even fucking twin engine like Beechcraft type aircraft on the first attempt. Old ladies can do it.
I mean, you can get lucky, and if you have somebody over the headphones telling you how to do it,
they talked her down.
Yeah,
how to do it.
That's generally how they do it. Like if the pilot has a heart attack or some shit.
I know the instruments. I know the controls and shit, and prop pitch and shit like that, and fucking throttle.
I'd be like, well,
I'd be looking where the landing gear,
fucking
landing flaps. I've just got to guess the stall speed. I think my experience on motorcycles and flying inside rotor wing aircraft and other aircraft, I could fake it. I could get the aircraft down on the ground.
Well, not to be dark, but this guy got the airplane down on the ground too.
Yeah, but
they all eventually end up on the ground.
But the landing gear was not down, and he wasn't he wasn't at a landing speed. He was at a fucking cruising speed.
Well, like I said, we're gonna get into what exactly happened, what they're pretty sure like what happened.
Yeah.
And like I said, yes, it was pilot error partially, but I don't think it was entirely his fault.
He's reading the instruments wrong.
Yeah, I think that's like part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I said, that Waylon Jennings thing, oh, that fucked me up. I can't imagine this. So I never want to make a joke at somebody that is like, unless I don't like them, then I don't care. But but you know what I mean? If that's like your best friend and like you made a joke, just don't joke about shit like that. Because then if it really happens, then you're going to feel really bad. And like I said, it fucked him up like pretty much the rest of his life. Now, I will note though, that when we get into talking about all the quote unquote victims of the Buddy Holly curse, like a little bit later on, I will note that Waylon Jennings and his other band member, Tommy Alsop, who was also supposed to be on the plane, but then lost his seat to Ritchie Valens in the coin toss, the fact that they were not affected by the curse should tell you that the curse isn't real, because you'd think that those two guys were like directly involved, right? So you'd think if there was actually a curse, then those two would be like right in the crosshairs. But neither of them had anything like particularly. I mean, they didn't die obviously until much later on. Waylon Jennings actually got quite famous, and he lived until 2002. I believe he was in his 60s when he died. He'd had some health problems and stuff like that. And Tommy Alsop, who lost his seat to Ritchie Valens, he lived until he was 85. So nothing bad happened. Like they didn't die in horrible, mysterious ways or anything like that. So you'd think that if there was a curse, then those two would be the first ones to be affected by it, but they were not.
Camp guy, the helicopter you're talking about is a CH-47 Chinook. I've ridden a lot of those too. Chinooks and Blackhawks and UH-1s. I like the old UH-1 Huey. That was wild too. All right, good.
So the aircraft that they were flying in, like I said, had a seat for the pilot and then 3 seats for the passenger. It was actually passengers. It was actually a Beechcraft Model 35 Bonanza, and had been built in 1947 and had been bought by the Dwyer Flying Service in 1958. It had been inspected fairly recently, was properly maintained. There was nothing wrong with the plane that they discovered. I feel like in later years, because, people love conspiracy theories and stuff, there were kind of legends going around about somebody sabotaged it, or the plane was defective, or there was an explosion or something like that. None of that is true. There was actually nothing wrong with the plane at all. The engine was still producing power when the airplane hit the ground. There was nothing wrong with the plane. The pilot was a 21-year-old man named Roger Arthur Peterson. And like I said, he kind of got a lot of hate in the ensuing years because he's like, oh, well, it was his mistake and he killed these 3 like icons of rock and roll, right? But like I said, it was a little bit more nuanced than that, I feel like. So he did have a commercial pilot certificate. He worked as a flight instructor for Dwyer, where the plane had been, rented from. He had actually been flying for 5 years, since 1954. and he had 711 hours of flight time, and about 128 hours of that were in a Bonanza. However, he was not qualified for the conditions that they were about to fly into. Now, he had about 52 hours of instrument training and had passed the written examination for an instrument rating, but he had failed the practical instrument flight check, probably like a little bit less than a year prior to the crash. So he did not have an instrument rating, meaning that if you're in conditions where you can't see because of weather conditions and you have to fly by the instruments, he was not rated to do that. The instrument training too, and this was kind of a big thing that that came up in the post-crash report, was that his training was all on conventional attitude indicators and not the one that was in this particular Bonanza. And the guy that did the YouTube video that he showed what they looked like, and I was like, oh, I could totally see why you would get fucked up. Because the attitude indicator that he trained on, as I think most indicators are today, it's basically like sky is blue, ground is brown. Like, and it's a big contrast. So you can see where you are. Like, you can see where the horizon is. You can see where up and down is. Like, if you can't see out the plane, you have to be able to see where you are in space. Otherwise, you're going to hit the ground. The old one that was in the Bonanza that he was flying that night was black on top and like goldish red, or like gold on the bottom, like goldish yellow. And so it was like opposite. It was like dark on the top. So they're speculating that because he was used to the one with the lighter color on the top and the darker color on the bottom, that he might have got disoriented and like confused looking at that because it was like flipped.
He may have thought that he was flying inverted, maybe.
Yeah. And when you can't see out of the plane, like your inner ear and shit like that is no help. You could be upside down and think you're right side up and shit like that. Like your brain is just, if it doesn't have anything to orient you, then you can't really tell where you are in space, which is, you know, admittedly a design flaw in the human brain. That's for sure. But yeah, they think that's one of the things that happened. And the weather, as we talked about, was already, it wasn't that bad when they were leaving, but it was deteriorating. Now, because of the weather, Peterson did what he was supposed to do. You couldn't just check your fucking cell phone like for weather reports. It's like, oh, what's the weather going to be? You couldn't do that. You had to like go to the weather service or call the weather service and be like, hey, this is the route. Like, what's it going to be like? So he contacted them several times, like before he left, saying like, you know, what's it like now? What's the ceiling look like? Like, what's the wind speed or whatever? And they basically said, well, it's kind of sucky, but it's not terrible. You know what I mean? Not necessarily catastrophic. Like, you could probably still fly in it. Like before he took off, very shortly before he took off, the ceiling was at 3,000 feet and visibility supposedly was 6 miles. There was light snow and winds of 20 knots, which is not great, but still doable, right? But the thing about it was that, one, it's the middle of the night. It's like almost 1 o'clock in the morning. The wind got more, you know, stronger, like as you went higher. And also the landscape, the route they were going to fly, was kind of a little bit barren, and there weren't that many lights on the ground because there weren't that many city lights or anything like that. So if you were up in the sky and like you were in clouds and shit like that, you couldn't really like look down and be like, oh, lights, and like see where the ground was. There wasn't lights down there, so like you couldn't see anything at night. So you wouldn't have a natural horizon. And here's where I think the pilot doesn't bear all the responsibility, because there were actually a couple of bad weather advisories that were issued, saying the visibility was getting worse, you know, freezing drizzle, you know, stronger winds. But for whatever reason, when he went for weather updates, they did not tell him this. I'm not really sure why they didn't. I don't know if it just slipped their mind or something. There was something where it wasn't communicated to him that it's like, hey, there's like a really bad weather advisory, because had it been communicated to him, because it wasn't just him, it was Dwyer, the guy that owned the, the place where they rented the planes out. They would have said, if the weather conditions were too bad, they'd be like, well, we can't go. So obviously it was not communicated to them how bad the weather was going to be, like along their route, because they would have grounded the flight, and they did not. So they were under the mistaken impression that the weather was still going to be bad, but not that bad. Like they would still be able to navigate it. Some people have also maybe thought that maybe they were really kind of head up to go because he felt like all this pressure, because these are like, they're big rock stars and they have to get to their next date, and it's like, I don't want to let them down, or I don't want to disappoint them, or whatever. So it could be that. So I kind of feel like the narrative about, oh, the pilot, he didn't know what he was doing, and he was reckless, and he flew into this storm and all that other kind of stuff, that's not entirely accurate. Yes, it was a storm, but I don't think it was conveyed to him like how bad it was. And I don't know why that was not.
20 knots is not a big deal.
That's what I mean. And it wasn't, but it was going to get worse, and advisories had been issued, and that was not communicated to him. So he thought it was going to be kind of sucky, but not too bad. And like I said, because of the fact that he was not instrument rated on that particular attitude indicator, and in fact, when I saw a picture of the two different indicators, I was like, oh, I could totally see how you would think you were fucking upside down, because it's like completely opposite, like the colors. So if you got up there and got disoriented and you couldn't see, and you thought you were going up, but you were actually going down, and I think that's probably what happened.
Flying by instruments is nerve-wracking too, for somebody who's not doing it all the time, because you can't see anything. So you're just seeing this damn instruments clusters, the instrument cluster ahead of you, and you're bored. You could put an autopilot on once you got you're at the right altitude, and you're on the right heading, and you've got your fucking horizon set and everything. But man, if you were in bad weather, you'd have a tendency to keep looking at your instruments going, is this thing all right? Is this thing all right? Fucking, oh shit, because it'd be nerve-wracking.
Well, yeah.
It'd be a lot of, I think I'm drifting.
Because you can't see.
You can't see. You could get disoriented.
Very easily.
And you wouldn't be like a 100% confident in the readings of your instruments. They'll play with your fucking mind.
Well, yeah.
What if that altimeter's wrong?
Yeah, what if that's not right?
What if that's not right?
Because it doesn't feel right.
And you look out, you look over, you can't see anything. There might not. You might see, if you're over town, you might see some lights down there, but maybe not. It might be hazy. You don't know. Visibility might not be good. It would bother you. But dudes do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you'd get used to it after a while, but it's like, holy crap. I get disoriented just walking up and down the stairs with my glasses on. I can't imagine like fucking flying at a plane when you can't fucking see anything. I got
disoriented going from Mississippi to New Orleans, going over the causeway. It was extremely gray and overcast. The causeway, which is a long bridge, it's like 30 miles long, going across the ocean. And the sky was gray, the causeway is gray,
and the
water's gray.
Yeah.
And the hood of the car that I'm driving is gray, and the interior of the car was gray.
Everything's gray.
And there was a slight crosswind, and I started to feel like I was spinning.
Yeah, I could see that.
There weren't any other cars with me. So I just put the fucking dotted line on the fucking right
that's
headlight and just fixated on the fucking on the hood. And man, I was dizzy as a motherfucker, and I drove like that for maybe 20 miles until I got off the fucking car, and I was fucking white knuckled. And then there was like seeing a sign go by, it helped me kind of orient, and that spinning sensation would go away.
Yeah,
everything was the same color, and it started to fuck with me.
Yeah, I could see that.
And it's kind of like flying at night by the instruments.
Because I had that happen a few times when I used to commute from Daytona. Like sometimes I would be driving home in the afternoon, there'd be a really, really bad thunderstorm. Yeah. And some of the thunderstorms in Florida, it's literally, it's so the rain is so hard that you can't
There's
see
no visibility.
anything. Like you can't see like 5 feet in front of you.
Yeah.
And so I would be driving on whatever that road is, and so I'd be driving on this highway like on the way home, and it would just fucking pour down like that, and I just like I would be terrified, and I would try to fixate on the side of the line on the side of the road, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the car in front of me. I couldn't see a single fucking thing. It was just a wall of water.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wanted to pull over, but I couldn't tell. I didn't even know if I was on the road or not.
You couldn't tell. Yeah, remember that happened to us when we were going to Daytona? We
Tampa.
were going to Tampa.
Yeah.
At night, and it
you can't see
boom,
shit.
we were just hit by a huge fucking downpour, and there was traffic all around us when it hit.
Yeah.
And I just slowed down to a crawl.
Yeah, that's the only thing you can do.
15 miles an hour.
Because then if you do hit somebody, at
least
it won't be.
Ahead of me, behind me,
nothing.
anything. I could see a little bit of the line in the headlights, but the headlights just kind of whited everything out. Yeah. And I guess everybody else was doing the same thing.
Yeah, like I said, there's nothing else you can do.
And man, it was maybe crawling at like 15 miles an hour. That's as fast as you could go. Until we finally just crawled out of it, and the cars were still around me.
Yeah.
Remember that shit?
I know, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Florida weather does not fuck around. Like I said, you literally cannot see the end of your hood.
Yeah. I drove just by feeling the wheels on the tarmac.
Yeah, it's like, is it still on the road? I hope so.
It feels like it, yeah.
You couldn't tell if you were in the right lane or not.
I couldn't even see the cars. I couldn't see the cars' brake lights in front of me.
Yeah.
Couldn't even see
I've driven in some storms like that too, where you couldn't I didn't even know.
And there was a car up there, but I couldn't see him. And he was maybe 20 feet ahead, maybe 30 feet ahead. It's hard to say. I mean, I think I would see his brake lights or his tail lights if he was like maybe 2 or 3 feet ahead, but that might be too late. I'm going 15. What if he slammed on the brake? You just had to, and you were afraid. And I was afraid to stop because the person behind me would have probably hit me.
Yeah. I mean, at least if you're only going 15 miles an hour, like obviously it's probably not going to kill you, but it's just kind of like I said, there's nothing else you can do. SideQuest says, when I was at flight school, they did this thing where they'd blindfold you and put you in a chair and spin you and spin in reverse and have you guess what direction you were facing. Yeah, I would fail that big time. Like I said, I get disoriented even when I can kind of see, so I can't imagine like not being able to see. I have no idea like what direction. So I kind of feel like what happened here was just, I don't think he was necessarily being reckless. I think that he thought it would be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he realized like how bad the weather was. And I don't think he realized that he would have to depend on the instruments, which he was not really qualified to do. And the instruments weren't really the same as the ones he was, used to. So I think all of those factors kind of combined, you know what I mean? So he takes off in the plane about 12:55 a.m. on February 3rd with his 3 passengers aboard. And there were people on the ground, and they saw the plane take off, and they saw it go toward the south, and then it turned northwest. They said they saw it climb to about an altitude of about 800 feet. Dwyer, the guy that, ran the aircraft thing, he was watching. He could see its tail light, and then he saw the tail light going down, which was a little alarming. So he tried to call the pilot on the radio, and there was no response. They actually didn't find the wreckage until about 9:30 the next morning. What they think happened was that the plane, basically it just went toward the ground like really fast, and the right tip of the right wing hit the ground, and it like pinwheeled, and it ended up crashing in this cornfield against this like barbed wire fence. Now the pilot was trapped inside the plane. They found him dead in there. All 3 of the passengers were thrown clear. There are pictures of, the bodies are covered up and everything, so it's not gruesome. But you can see where they are, like in relation to the plane. So they were all thrown clear and were all killed pretty much immediately.
They probably merged with the ground going 130. That's probably how fast that
They
plane was going.
think they were going about 170
170, okay.
miles per hour when they hit the ground.
Plane's faster than I thought it was. Yeah.
So there was debris. Like I said, there's lots of pictures of the crash site. The debris is scattered about 540 feet.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it pinwheeled, like, and then just came to rest like up against this fence.
He saw it descend rapidly. He must have lost his horizon.
I think that's probably what happened. He just got up there and the visibility was shittier than he thought.
Yeah.
And then he got disoriented. He was like looking at the instruments and thinking it was the other way around.
He thought he was flying inverted or something and trying to right the plane.
I think that's what happened.
And he thought he was pulling up, but he was actually inverted, pulling. When you're inverted, he inverted to try to fucking. He thought he was inverted, so he inverted himself to try to right itself.
I think that's what happened.
And tried to pull up, which if you're inverted and you pull up, you go down.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And then because he banked, they said they said they could tell it was in a steep bank when it hit the ground.
Yeah. He was trying to figure out why he couldn't fucking get the horizon. Because the colors were swapped.
Were inverted, yeah. Like from what he was used to.
Yeah.
So
he was probably doing good, and then all of a sudden his brain clicked. He saw those colors reversed, and without thinking, he put himself into a spin, basically, or he rolled inverted and pulled up, which sent him to the ground, upside down.
Yeah.
And maybe he tried to right himself. He might have like, wait, well, no, that's not right. And but then it was too late.
I mean, they were really this happened like almost immediately after takeoff. Like it was only a few minutes because they found the wreckage was only like 5 or 6 miles from the airport.
Yeah.
And because like I said, Dwyer saw the taillight of the plane like going down. So it was like only a minute or two like after it took off.
Yeah, he was flying all right, and then he looked at his fucking artificial horizon and saw the colors reversed, and it fucking fucked him up.
And he was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But it must have happened like really quickly because they said there was no distress signal, like he didn't call anybody on the radio. So it must have happened like really, really fast.
Well, as soon as he looked at the artificial horizon instrument and fucking saw that the colors were fucking
like,
backwards,
oh, shit.
He immediately started fucking taking evasive action, trying to fucking right the plane and put himself into the ground. That's the only thing that could have happened.
Yeah.
He didn't realize that the colors were switched.
Yeah. Because like I said, that wasn't the instrument he...
Yeah.
Because the newer ones, like I said, the newer ones that he had trained on
something more
were
reasonable.
were like light blue on top and like dark brown on the bottom.
Ground.
Yeah, which
more instinctive.
Which that's more like instinctive. You would think they would be like that.
He was trained for that instinctive look, and he saw the look was backwards, and it fucked him up. He did, and he probably did it
was
without
like
even
black
thinking.
And gold.
And he probably did it without even thinking.
Yeah, he probably did. That's what I mean. So he probably thought he was upside down.
Yeah,
is what I think happened. So, like I said, yes, it's pilot error, but not really. I mean, it's understandable. It's just like a horrible accident. Like just all of these things like compounded. You know what I mean? So when they found, I mean, obviously they found them all in the field at 9:30 the next morning because they knew something had happened. So they had to go searching like for where the wreckage was, and they found all the bodies, and they thought they had all like been killed like pretty much instantly, like as soon as they hit the ground. And as Oracle mentioned earlier, Buddy Holly's wife, Maria Elena, she found out on the news that he was dead. Like they didn't, and actually I think if I remember correctly, because a lot the old documentary I watched had like a lot of the family members, like Ritchie Valens' family members and stuff like that, and a lot of them said the same thing. It's like they just saw it in the paper, like they saw the headline and they were like, "What? Can you fucking imagine?" Yeah. Like no one called them first.
I didn't, that's how it was back then.
I know. It's like they didn't really give a shit.
Their job was to give you the news. They gave you the news.
I mean, that was the news, but it's like it would have been nice if they would have like called the families so they didn't have to like read it in the fucking newspaper, like see it when they open the door, like to get the milk or whatever. That's like fucking horrible.
Well, it happens.
It does.
All those people that fucking died in 9/11, those. When your plane vanished, you saw those fucking buildings burned. You knew that was your people.
Well, yeah, you knew.
You knew what it was.
But that's the thing. That none of them knew though. They just thought they thought, oh, they're going to the next spot. Nobody knew that they had got a plane or anything like that because they were on a bus, right?
Yeah. It was like died in a plane crash. Where'd this come from?
Yeah. So it's like they wouldn't have immediately gone to that. It's like what a plane. They were on a bus, right? Because they were on a bus. But they didn't know about renting the plane and everything like that. So sadly, Maria Elena, who, like I said, was I think she was 5 or 6 months pregnant at the time of the crash. She subsequently had a miscarriage, which most people do attribute to the shock of finding out. I mean, which is understandable, right? So so generally, her and the unborn baby are considered like the first victims of the Buddy Holly curse, I guess, because that's like pretty direct.
The Buddy Holly curse.
Yeah. And then, like I said, Waylon Jennings found out about it. That he's like, oh man, the last thing I fucking said was, I hope you're playing prayers.
See, he got hit by the Buddy Holly curse.
But I mean, he lived
Yeah.
into his 60s.
Yeah, it fucked him up though.
But yeah, he was not right.
We saw interviews with him. He said it just fucked him up.
I don't blame him. Like I said,
For years.
intellectually, you know, you didn't do that.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like, emotionally, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? Like, I would feel bad about that, like, my whole entire fucking life.
He was real confessional about it.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I'd want to confess too. Man, I said that.
Because that's the last thing you said to him.
Yeah.
Ugh. That's what I mean. Don't say shitty stuff to people that you like. Because you never know if that's the last thing that like I said, you can say bad shit to people you don't like all day long because you don't care as much about that.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck. But it's just kind of, yeah, because I can think of a few people where if that was the last thing I said to them, I'd be like, man, I don't care. But yeah. So here's the shitty thing. It's the 50s, late 50s. And you would think, I feel like in this day and age, if something like this happened, like there was a big tour and there was all these big rock stars on it, and then there was like a plane crash and it killed like a bunch of them, I feel like they would cancel the tour. I mean, out of respect, you would think. I mean, I think people would look askance if they didn't. Back in the 50s, they were not having that shit. Nope, show must go on. They kept on going. Which I can't even imagine. Waylon Jennings talked about that too. Because he had to play, he lived, right? So he had to play like the next couple shows, and they had to get a replacement for Buddy Holly. So he's back there knowing his best friend, who should be singing there, is dead. And like, he's still got to fucking play, you know what I mean? Because he needed the money.
Yep.
So what they did for each subsequent stop on the tour was they would recruit kind of local people that were sort of well known, you know what I mean? Like wherever they were. So famously, a 15-year-old named Bobby V helped fill the gap at the next show. And he would actually become quite famous in his own right later on. And at one of the places, Ronnie Smith, who we'll be talking about a little bit more later in regards to the curse, he was from Texas, and he had worked with musicians that Holly knew. And so he was brought in to finish the tour with the Crickets, like or that wasn't the Crickets, but with Buddy Holly's band, like as the front man, to replace them. So so the tour kept on going. And I feel like I said, it was obviously a huge fucking deal at the time. But I feel like it didn't, I don't know if it had quite the cultural resonance that it has now until that song came out. The Don McLean song, American Pie.
Yeah.
Which, like I said, doesn't mention Buddy Holly by name, but the lyrics of the song allude to him and allude to the plane crash. But it's kind of like about a larger cultural moment, I guess. And how, like, looking back from when that song was written, which was 1971, 1972, like 10 years later, all the subsequent things that had happened in the wake of that crash, and how that crash almost seemed like the end of an era, like the end of the innocence of the 50s. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like it was sort of...
It was the day that music died.
Yeah, so I think that's why it was, particularly poignant that he called it that.
Yeah.
Because he was like, that was kind of when everything changed. But people only saw that in hindsight, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, like you do.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, you can't really see things in the moment, like when they're happening. You don't really understand the impact of them until much later. And so I think that's kind of what...
60s music came in and changed everything.
Yeah. And the thing about it, particularly the Beatles, which we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, but they were hugely, hugely influenced by Buddy Holly. And matter of fact, the reason they called themselves the Beatles was because of his band, the Crickets. And I think they covered some of his songs, and
they were hugely influenced also by fucking Rolling Stones. Rolling Stones was huge, was huge in the 60s, and they were fucking hugely influenced by rock and roll, southern rock and roll. They were even faking southern accents, like fucking Wild Horses and shit. Fucking. That's funny. The Stones were the fake Southern rock band for a while on certain songs.
Yeah. John Gora says about the tour going on. He
Yeah.
says the tour managers were probably World War II vets, and they're like, "Hey, guys,
Yeah.
die, deal with it." Yeah.
Most professions were like that though.
Yeah.
Fucking,
Well, like I said, I feel
those
like
guys up on the Great Lakes fucking doing all that shipping. Yeah, the weather's bad, but we got to deliver this fucking iron ore.
yeah,
We're not
which
gonna
I was
wait.
just thinking about the wreck of the Emmons
Yeah,
Fitzgerald
we're
when we
going,
did that show
bro.
about,
It's got to be there on time.
because that's kind of another thing.
It's just a mentality.
That's kind of another event that was obviously like horribly tragic and was a big deal when it happened, but I feel like it didn't really get its cultural cachet until it got a song written about it.
Yeah.
Like with the Gordon Lightfoot song. And I think kind of the same thing happened here. Obviously, like I said, it was a huge deal at the time. You know, and everybody mourned for them and everything like that. I mean, it was a big deal. They were like really famous.
Yeah.
And 3 of them dying at once, especially when they were so young, was like was a fucking huge deal. But I feel like it didn't really imprint itself until that Don McLean song came out, because that was like a big hit. I remember that song being everywhere on the fucking radio in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I actually really dug that. I still do. Any song when I was growing up in the 70s, any song that was about death or like kind of dark, that was like catnip.
Yeah.
So that's why I was into Wreck of the Emmons Fitzgerald, like any
Hotel California.
Hotel California,
had a real
like
dark
anything
sound.
that was like talking about death or sounded like it was
Devil Went
talking
Down to
about
Georgia.
death. Yeah, like I would be all into it. So
Yeah.
American Pie, even though it's more abstract, I guess, but it's kind of more talking about a cultural moment, but it is talking about there are allusions to the crash.
Yeah, the
in it.
Emmons Fitzgerald. That's what. Then the shipping companies realized that, you know what, bauxite really can be late. It's not worth losing the guys and the ship.
All
Just
of
to-
those fucking
just-
dudes that died.
And then the cargo, just because it's going to be a day late, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Really, it's not really worth it. Just let it be late.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, like I said, I kind of feel like, and the same thing happening here with like the tour going on. There was like,
Yeah.
what? There's money to be made. We've sold
Yeah.
all these tickets. You know,
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah,
Which
show must
y-
go on. It's
which
literally came from that.
Yeah, which
That
which
mentality.
I mean, to us it just seems very callous. Obviously, 3 people are dead. You know what I mean? 3 of your biggest stars that were on the tour are dead, and it's just kind of like,
There's something about entertainment. The crowds demand entertainment, and you got to be there.
yeah.
You got the show must go on. We have to show them something.
Well, it did.
and that's yeah.
It did.
And,
And,
they would
and
just-
I'm sure
would
that
say, Buddy would want it that way.
I'm sure the morale was not great
Yeah,
after that fucking shit happened.
yeah.
And they're just kind of like, I'm sure, and I'm also sure nobody talked about getting a plane after that. We're like, you know what? We'll just freeze
Yeah.
on the bus. Thanks. I
People-
mean, buses can crash too, but you're a lot more likely to survive.
People weren't
that.
soft back then. You know, they were cool, but they just were like I said, they were war veterans. A lot of them, the people running the show. You know, they'd been through World War II. So like, nah, this is people die. Let's go. Show must go on.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, boo-hoo. Come on.
Normal. Yeah.
Which, like I said,
Shake it off.
It is,
Yeah.
but honestly, I kind of feel like the fact that they were like that
Yeah.
is the reason that so many people got fucking traumatized and shit like that, and why they all died young of like alcoholism and
Yeah.
shit like that, because they were not dealing
Well,
with the emotions that they were feeling. They were just tamping them down, and it was coming out in other
They
ways.
lived fast and they died young.
Yeah, because that's not healthy.
They fucking drank and smoked themselves and ate steaks to death.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not real healthy to
Yeah.
fucking just tamp down
They
your
tried to
emotions
live
like
as
that,
much as they could.
because it leaks out in like other terrible ways.
I don't think they knew they were doing it.
No, I don't think so either. I
I
don't
think they were not conscious of it.
I don't think they were that self-aware.
No.
You know, people are nowadays, which I think is better, but like back then, I don't think they were aware of it. They're just like, "Well, we don't talk about that."
Well, they thought you were an old man at 35.
That's true. Well, they looked like old men at 30.
Yeah, they looked like old men at 35.
to be honest.
Yeah. And if you were 60, shit, you're washed up. I'm almost 60. If I were to show up there, they would never believe I was 60. You know.
Yeah, like people are aging a lot
Yeah.
slower, a lot differently
live-
than they used to.
Yeah. Billy Idol called it on the fucking Cyberpunk album. People living longer through fucking science and technology.
So because this was such, you know, a cultural milestone, I guess. So there were all of these urban legends started to spring up about what eventually came to be called the Buddy Holly curse. Now, unlike Tutankhamun's curse, Or the curse that surrounds James Dean's Porsche, I guess, where it's like, parts of the car, like people were in car wrecks. So we should do a show about that too. That might be interesting. Um, I feel like those had more like more solid rules. I feel like the Buddy Holly curse doesn't really. I mean, there are a lot of quote unquote victims of it, which we'll get into. Um, and some of the connections are pretty creepy, not gonna lie. But I feel like some authors have taken the parameters of the curse and expanded it out to a point where it doesn't really mean anything anymore. Like I said, it's kind of like a reach. Like it's just this kind of expanding tree of death and misfortune kind of thing. Like, this person replaced Buddy Holly somewhere and then they die weirdly, and then somebody does a cover of a Buddy Holly song and they die weirdly, and all this other kind of stuff. Like, and pretty much every rock star that died young in a plane crash has at one point been, say, they were a victim of the Buddy Holly curse, even if they didn't have anything to do with Buddy Holly. So, so there's that. Now, I will note that there is no single canonical list of all the victims of the Buddy Holly curse, because it's a piece of folklore and was assembled, obviously, retrospectively by different authors. And different authors have different criteria for who they let in the club. I feel like one of the major sources for the modern version of it, at least, is a book called Take a Walk on the Dark Side by R. Gary Patterson. And it has a chapter called The Buddy Holly Curse where it goes into like a lot of the quote unquote canonical victims. And there was also this writer, Susan Massino, who was the lady that I was listening to on Coast to Coast AM last night, who kind of talked about it as well. I don't know if she wrote a whole book about it, but she, talked about it at length, like on the show. So let's first talk about, we've already mentioned probably the first quote unquote victim of the curse, who was Buddy Holly's widow, Maria Elena, who had a miscarriage when she heard about his death. So her and the unborn baby are considered the first two victims of the curse. Even though obviously there's no definitive proof that the miscarriage was caused by the news, but I would be shocked if it wasn't. The second victim of the curse was Ronnie Smith. Ronnie Smith was the Texas singer that was brought in to replace Buddy Holly on the Winter Dance Party, like after Buddy Holly died, obviously. So he was 18 years old, and he was recommended by the drummer of Buddy Holly's band, Carl Bunch, the guy with the frostbite. And he was brought in to fill Holly's place, like for the remaining dates on the tour. Now, after the tour ended, he had kind of a hard time. He had some real bad mental health problems. He had some bad drug problems, and he was institutionalized. And in 1962, he committed suicide, and he was 22 years old, just as Buddy Holly was. Now, this is kind of more what they're talking about when they talk about the curse, because this guy did replace Buddy Holly on the tour, and then committed suicide only a couple years later. Now there is one correction that I mean, this is kind of pedantic, but he's sometimes described as becoming the new lead singer of the Crickets. That's not exactly true. He was just brought in as a temporary replacement to finish that tour out after Buddy Holly died. He wasn't brought on as like permanent or anything like that. Not like it matters, but I like to get everything factually correct. And then there's a dude named David Box. Now this guy was another singer who replaced Buddy Holly. Now after Buddy Holly died, Jerry Allison and the surviving members of the Crickets continued making records. So they brought in David Box, who was a young singer from West Texas, who was very influenced by Buddy Holly, and he sang with the group briefly, and he sang on some of their later records, like Peggy Sue Got Married and a couple of the other ones. Now, David Box eventually left the Crickets and, went out on his own. And on October 23rd, 1964, he was killed in a small chartered aircraft, which crashed near Houston at the age of 21. So he replaced Buddy Holly, and he also died in a little bitty plane. Which, yeah, a lot of people that are like into the curse are just like, oh, so creepy. That is pretty creepy, to be honest with you. Now, I feel like in the book, that Patterson book that, that has a whole chapter about the curse, he tries to make the connection a little bit creepier by saying that David Box was 22, the same age as Buddy Holly when he died, but he was actually 21, like I said. So I just like to get it factually correct. But yeah. And then there was Eddie Cochran. Eddie Cochran was Buddy Holly's contemporary, obviously. You know, a very well-known rock and roll star in his own right, and he was also a friend of Buddy Holly's. And he was kind of a member of the same kind of first generation rock and roll stars. Now, he was really fucked up by the deaths of Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Ritchie Valens, and he wrote a memorial song for them called 3 Stars. And one of the final songs he recorded was called 3 Steps to Heaven. And on that record, some of the members of the Crickets played on that record, like one of the last recordings that he made. On April 17th, 1960, which was just a little over a year after Buddy Holly died, Eddie Cochran died from injuries that he got when his taxi crashed in England. He was 21 years old. Now, some of the curse stories actually go farther than this and say that Eddie Cochran had actually been scheduled to travel on Buddy Holly's plane, or, you know, he was supposed to be on there but somehow didn't get on, and so like he avoided death and then like he died a little bit later. That part is not really, I do think they considered Eddie Cochran for the tour, but he wasn't there like to get on the plane. Like, that's not true. He wasn't like there like to give up his seat or anything like that, like Waylon Jennings was and all of that. By the same token, Gene Vincent was in the taxi with Eddie Cochran, and he was also in the crash. Now, he was not killed, but he was injured really badly. And he had a bad leg injury from an earlier motorcycle accident, and so the car accident, like, you know, made that even worse. And Gene Vincent, you know, his life after that, he, you know, was an alcoholic and he had like poor health, and he actually ended up dying at 36 years old in 1971 from a ruptured stomach ulcer. And some of the curse narratives say that Gene Vincent was particularly close to Buddy Holly and the members of the Crickets. But I don't think the connection there was as strong as Eddie Cochran. Like, Eddie Cochran was friends with Buddy Holly and had done a song memorializing them like after the crash. Gene Vincent is kind of more of a tangential. I mean, Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent were friends, obviously, because they were together in the same cab. But I don't think Gene Vincent was like as connected with Buddy Holly as Eddie Cochran was. You know what I'm saying? And then there's Bobby Fuller. We should do a whole show about this because this shit's weird. So he was kind of like, he was the leader of the Bobby Fuller Four, probably most famous for I Fought the Law. And he was a big fan of Buddy Holly and like modeled a lot of his own sound off Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Now, his hit, I Fought the Law, was actually written by Sonny Curtis, who was in the Crickets after Buddy Holly died, right? And who was Buddy Holly's friend also. Bobby Fuller also recorded a song called Love's Made a Fool of You, which was written by Buddy Holly and Bob Montgomery. On July 18th, 1966, Bobby Fuller, who was then 23, was found dead in his mom's car outside his apartment in Hollywood. His clothes and the inside of the car was like reeked of gasoline. There are also reports that there was gasoline like in his sort, like he had drank gasoline too. I don't know if that's the case. The authorities initially treated the death as possible suicide. The medical findings said maybe asphyxiation from gasoline fumes. The manner of death was eventually classified as accidental, but the circumstances of it were so weird that all of these conspiracy theories sprung up about it, including claims that Bobby Fuller had been murdered, usually by the mob, is what they usually say, after he became involved with the wrong woman. Like he was seeing some mobster's girlfriend on the side or something like that. That's what the story says anyway. Or there are also theories that he was killed because of some disputes in the music business, Or also this one's kind of out there, but that some people that knew Charles Manson had killed him. You know what I mean?
Sounds out there.
Yeah, that's a little out there. Now, obviously, none of these theories have been substantiated. The initial autopsy report, because I feel like I've seen like Hollywood mysteries shows about Bobby Fuller, and a lot of them say something like, well, he was beat up or he had like bruises all over him and stuff like that. Like and then they were like, oh, suicide, like he beat his own ass, you know what I mean, to death. But the initial autopsy report didn't find any broken bones or cuts or anything like that, so it didn't look like he'd been beaten up, and I'm not really sure where that part of the story came from. Like, I don't know if they did another autopsy later and found more shit, or I don't know.
What was the cause of death?
Asphyxiation from gasoline fumes.
Yeah, that's what he's huffing gasoline.
Yeah.
Somebody's huffing gasoline.
Probably. But yeah, they just found him in his mom's car.
Yeah.
But, you know, because the circumstances of it were kind of weird, like he was just suddenly found like in his mom's car, like in the driveway, like just laying there. And,
maybe he was going to set himself on fire.
It possibly,
The fumes got to him before he could do it. Something like that.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, it is pretty weird.
Some kind of suicide.
So Bobby Fuller is usually considered a victim of the curse as well, because he was a big Buddy Holly fan, and like I said, had a lot of associations through like members of the Crickets and stuff like that. Was, you know, and he was really influential on his own sound. But yeah, because his death was so weird, I mean, obviously he's going to be put in that list, right? And then this is kind of strange. Then there's Joe Meek. Now, he was a British music producer, and he was absolutely obsessed with Buddy Holly. He was into the occult, kind of, or like the paranormal. And he reportedly believed that he was communicating with Buddy Holly, like after Buddy Holly died.
Yeah, like
right?
you do.
Like you do.
Yeah.
He was also a producer on a song called A Tribute to Buddy Holly, which was done by Mike Berry. And there's also a very famous story that Joe Meek had allegedly gone to a tarot reader before Buddy Holly died. And he told Buddy Holly that this tarot reader had told him that Buddy Holly was going to die on February 3rd, and that which he did. And so he called up and warned him. So a lot of versions of the story, there's a lot of different versions of the story, obviously. And some accounts, and I even heard this one on one of the documentaries, said that he called Buddy Holly and said, oh, my tarot reader said you're going to die on February 3rd, 1958, which was a year early, and which by the time he made the phone call had already passed. So Buddy Holly just kind of made a joke about it. He's like, oh, well, I guess I'm safe, you know what I mean? Because that's already gone. But he actually died on February 3rd, 1959. Like I said, I don't know how legit this story is, but it's a very famous one that goes around that he had a premonition. But then it gets weirder. So exactly 8 years after the plane crash, February 3rd, 1967, Joe Meek shot and killed his landlady, whose name was Waylon Jennings, and then he shot himself on the day of Buddy Holly's plane crash, like 8 years later.
Curse guy.
The curse got him.
You're fighting over the rent.
I guess. I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah. And
that might be another good show to do, is Joe Meek, because that was kind of a weird story.
And after he killed her, he's like, I ain't going to prison, man. I fucked up.
Yeah, and he just did that.
He was probably
I'm not paying that
out of money. He didn't have any money.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I also find it's worth correcting also that Joe Meek is sometimes called Buddy Holly's British manager or his British producer. He was not either of those things. He was a big Buddy Holly fan, and he had produced a tribute to Buddy Holly, like done by someone else, but he didn't have a professional relationship with him. I think he knew him, like, enough to like call and say, hey, a tarot reader told me about that you were going to die or something like that. But they didn't have any like he wasn't his producer
tarot
or anything.
Told me to die. Okay.
That you're going to die like on February 3rd. That's how the story goes anyway. And then there's a guy called Cowboy Copus. And this was another musician that was killed in a plane crash. He was judging by the name, he's a country star, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of appears on he's kind of more of a second tier curse guy. Because the claim is that he had previously toured with or kind of crossed professional paths with Buddy Holly at some point. Now, Cowboy Copus was killed on March 5th, 1963, also in a plane crash in Tennessee. This was the same plane crash that killed the much more famous Patsy Cline and also killed another musician called Hawkshaw Hawkins, another country star, and the pilot whose name was Randy Hughes. So I feel like the connection here isn't as pronounced because I don't really know how much, like, I don't know if he knew Buddy Holly or if he had worked with any of Buddy Holly's, like, other people in his circle or whatever. And because of him being in the curse, then Patsy Cline usually gets thrown in there too because she died in the same plane crash. And I think the only connection here was that she was another kind of young musician that was killed in a plane crash. So, you know what I mean? And if you're going to go that route, I mean, anybody, any musician that was killed in a plane crash, and a lot of them were, would be part of the curse. Because I don't think she knew Buddy Holly or anything like that. Because I feel like once you get out here, I feel like the curse is kind of just less, people that are actually connected with Buddy Holly, which a lot of the first curse people were. And just kind of rock and country musicians who died in plane crashes, and didn't really know him. However, some more shit happened later on. So now we're getting to Robert Gittler. And this guy was a screenwriter, and he was actually the screenwriter that wrote the Buddy Holly story, the movie that came out with Gary Busey in 1978. So the curse is jumping forward a couple decades at this point. So Robert Gittler wrote the screenplay, and he died by suicide on May 16th, 1978. And it's generally reported that this was only 2 days before the movie was released in theaters. And this event is usually cited as kind of like the second generation of the curse, which is no longer revolving around people who knew Buddy Holly, but are now people involved with the movie about him that came out in the 70s. Another person that is sometimes associated with the curse is good old Keith Moon. Now, this is admittedly a loose connection, but this coincidence is pretty weird. So Keith Moon, obviously from The Who, he didn't really have any particular relationship with Buddy Holly. However, he attended a screening or a preview of the Buddy Holly story, the movie, immediately before his death. On September 7th, 1978, he died from an overdose of medication that had been prescribed to him to treat his alcohol withdrawal. September 7th was Buddy Holly's birthday. So that whole entire sequence, he watches the movie about Buddy Holly, and then he dies on Buddy Holly's birthday, right after seeing the movie. That pretty much guaranteed him a spot on the curse list, even though I don't think he knew Buddy Holly or he didn't have any meaningful relationship with him. But that is pretty weird. And then there's Gary Busey. Now, Gary Busey is obviously still alive, as far as I know. He played Buddy Holly in the Buddy Holly story in 1978. And he got an Academy Award nomination. It's a great movie. I didn't have time to watch the whole thing, but I watched 2/3 of it, I think, before we had to do the show. And I really liked it so far. I might watch the rest of it later. It's free on YouTube. Now, a decade after the movie came out, I didn't actually remember that this had happened to Gary Busey, and I'm like, oh, well, that explains a lot. Poor Gary Busey. You know what I mean? That's why
Uncle Gary.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of a nut before this, but you know what I mean? This didn't help. So about a decade after the movie came out, December 4th, 1988, Gary Busey was in a horrible, horrible motorcycle accident in Culver City. He did not have a helmet on. Don't do that, kids.
Yeah.
And his head struck a curb. And yeah. Ooh, I can just imagine the noise that made. Oh. And because you always ride your motorcycle, and I'm terrified of that happening to you.
Yeah, I had a helmet though.
Yeah. But I mean, you were in an accident once where the helmet flew
Came
off.
Yeah, I didn't have it strapped.
And then you were in a coma. That was
back
in the 90s.
Just run up the street, fucking turning some damn videos. Put me in a coma.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me several years to recover from it.
Yeah, fucked him up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Always wear a helmet, kids.
Yeah. And strap that bitch.
And yeah. Don't just, I'm just going down the street.
Yeah.
So I didn't even strap it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because look what happens. You could be in a coma. So yeah, so Gary Busey's head hit the curb, and obviously he got like a really bad skull and brain injuries.
I wonder what kind of motorcycle it was.
I don't know. It didn't say.
See, I got hit by a car, so it was different.
Yeah.
I hit the ground, but I hit the car first.
Yeah.
And at all that tumbling, the helmet came off. So the helmet did protect me, but
actually, it probably would have killed you if you.
Yeah, it probably killed me without the helmet.
Yeah. Because so at least you got some protection until it came off.
Yeah, ran a red light in an intersection. The car did. Boom! I fucking merged right in with his fucking door.
Yikes.
And I went over the top of the car and bounced across.
Eesh.
And then the helmet came off during all that bouncing and shit.
What happened to that person that was driving the car?
I don't know.
Did they get in trouble?
Probably did. Yeah, they were military.
Yeah.
That was the end of my military career for the while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was only like a month away from fucking getting out.
Yeah. And then that shit happened.
Yeah. It's all right, though. I got to check for the rest of my life.
Well, yeah. Because like I said, I mean, understandably so. I mean, you were pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
You're pretty fucked up. So yeah, so that's...
I got that retirement out of fucking Office Spaces. Remember the guy fucking was gonna kill himself in the fucking car? And then his wife saw him, so he backed out and got hit by the car. And he said, one day, then he's all fucking... He got a check for the rest of his life. He goes, one day, good things will happen to you guys too. Just remember that from Office Spaces?
Office Space?
Office Space, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember.
You remember that scene?
I mean, I don't remember that scene. I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
Everybody he worked with was like, man, I wish I get hit by a car. he was acting like he made the big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom, she didn't get hit by a car, but she was hit by another car while she was in her car. And she's all right now, but it fucked her up pretty bad.
She getting a check for that?
You would
think insurance and shit.
I don't know.
That other person's insurance.
It was a long time ago. Well, no. The other driver didn't have insurance.
Oh, they did?
Nope.
Damn.
So yeah, so I think their insurance, their car insurance, ended up paying a lot of it.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, her arm and leg were crushed, and she still has metal in there, like metal bars.
She got hit by a Mustang. Wasn't it a Mustang?
I don't remember what kind of car it was.
I thought she said it was a Mustang.
The passenger in the other car had her legs severed.
Oh yeah.
The driver wasn't hurt. The other driver wasn't hurt, but she didn't have insurance.
Yeah.
It was raining. It was in Jacksonville, in Florida, and it was raining. My mom was just driving to work, and it wasn't raining hard, but the road was a little bit wet, and I guess the girl, she was on the other side of the highway, and she lost control of her car and just slid. So she slid over into my mom's lane, and they hit like head on. So, I'm glad she survived through all of that, but holy crap. So Gary Busey obviously didn't die, but he's kind of put in there. It's just like, oh, look at this shit that happened to him. Like the curse almost got him. Like it was supposed to get him, but he survived. Some versions of the story like add kind of other embellishments, I guess, where Gary Busey had Buddy Holly's guitar like at his house or like memorabilia or something like that. Now he was like a big Buddy Holly fan, so that's not crazy to think that he might have had some Buddy Holly stuff like in his house, but I'm not sure that that's ever been corroborated. And like I said, because he was a big fan, I don't really think that would have been that weird anyway. So then there's Ricky Nelson, and he was kind of, he was in the same kind of 50s rock and roll world, I guess, as Buddy Holly, and he had done some covers of Buddy Holly songs like in some of his shows, and supposedly the last song that he did at his last show on December 30th, 1985 was a Buddy Holly song, Rave On. The day after that, Ricky Nelson and 6 other people died after a fire started aboard his DC-3 while it was attempting to land near DeKalb, Texas. The fire was eventually attributed to a fuel system problem. So this is kind of another, that one's kind of more like it was a plane crash. He had supposedly just done a Buddy Holly show at his song at his last show, like as his last song, and then he also died in a small plane crash, which is kind of creepy. Then there's Del Shannon. This one's kind of a moderate connection, I guess, and some of the details have been sort of mangled in the retellings. Del Shannon did have a long association with Buddy Holly and performed with a lot of musicians that had worked with Buddy Holly, so he wasn't, and he'd done like Buddy Holly tribute events and things like that. He had actually been, because the Surf Ballroom, which is where the last show was, the Big Bopper and Ritchie Valens and Buddy Holly played before the plane crash, is still open, and every anniversary, I think they still do like a tribute show. And so Del Shannon had been doing these tribute shows. I think he started doing them in 1979 and was like doing them every year. Now, on February 3rd, 1990, which was the 31st anniversary of Buddy Holly's death, Del Shannon performed at the Fargo Civic Center in North Dakota. And this show also had Bobby V, who had been brought in to the original show, like after the crash in 1959, and a few members of the Crickets. 5 days later, on February 8th, Del Shannon committed suicide at his home in California. Some accounts of the curse actually put the final show at the Surf Ballroom. This is not correct. It was actually at the Fargo Civic Center, like I said. But obviously, if you want it to fit into the curse narrative, it would be much spookier if it was at the Surf. He did play shows there, but the last one that he played was not there. You know what I mean? It was someplace else. The last show that he did, though, was February 3rd, which was the anniversary of the crash. Now, this one, like I said, this one's kind of out there. Like, not out there, but a tenuous connection at best. John Lennon.
Damn.
Now, the Beatles were unquestionably, and admittedly, I mean, Paul McCartney in particular has said how big of an influence Buddy Holly was on the Beatles. And the band that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were in prior to the Beatles, which was called the Quarrymen, they did a cover of Buddy Holly's That'll Be the Day in 1958. And the fact that they were named the Beatles was because Buddy Holly's band was called the Crickets. Like, that's where they got the idea. John Lennon also did a version of Peggy Sue on his album Rock and Roll, which came out in 1975. And I feel like after John Lennon got murdered in December of 1980, some of people that, have lists of the curse victims added John Lennon like retroactively, even though I don't think, I mean, there's a connection because they were influenced by him and they had covered some of his songs, but I don't think he knew Buddy Holly personally or anything like that. So I kind of feel like at this stage, it's sort of like anybody that was influenced by him, which could be anybody, honestly, because he was like super influential and then like died in a horrible way. Like, you could add them to the curse if you're going that route. And then,
if you ever heard that name, you're added to the curse.
That's what I mean. It's like just the fact that we're doing this show right now, we might have cursed us and all of y'all.
Just by knowing this dude's name. Yeah.
Sorry. You know what I mean?
I died at 95 and it was because of the curse.
It's just kind of like the Men Who Stare at Goats when they talk about the dim mak.
Yeah, the dim mak.
And where he did the dim mak on somebody and then he's like, and then he died right away. No, it was like so many years later. Yeah, it was just kind of like that. It reminded me of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so and then there was Mark Bolan, who obviously was the frontman of T-Rex, and he was killed in a car crash in 1977. He appears in Gary Patterson's list of the curse. He's kind of, like I said, B tier, like curse victims. Now the folklore connection here is that I don't know if it was a pen. I've heard them say pen, or I've also heard them say pin, like a pin, like a badge, kind of. That it had Buddy Holly's name on it, like in the car, like in the wrecked car, like after he died. So this detail has circulated a lot through the curse books and, discussions of the paranormal and things like that. But I feel like there's really no way of proving that. Like, I've seen like some sources that just debunked it outright, said no, they didn't find anything like that in the wreckage. So I'm not really sure like where that story started. I mean, it's possible that they could, but that doesn't mean, yeah, it's weird, but so, and Mark Bolan, I don't really think, other than just the standard, everyone was influenced by Buddy Holly. I don't think he was in particular influenced by Buddy Holly, not the way the Beatles were. And then there's Phil Ochs. He was a folk singer, songwriter. He died in 1976. And he usually appears on, again, like kind of more expansive lists of curse victims. Um, he used to do a Buddy Holly medley like during his shows, and that's pretty much the only connection that I could find. Um, and considering the number of people who have covered Buddy Holly songs, which is a lot, um, the curse would be essentially limitless. You know what I mean? Like I said, we could be cursed right now, just like talking about it. So, um, and then there's Phil Spector. You guys remember Phil Spector with that crazy fucking hair?
Yeah.
So he's been incorporated into some modern retellings of the curse. Because on February 3rd, 2003, February 3rd being the 44th anniversary of the crash, the actress Lana Clarkson was found shot to death at Phil Spector's house. We should do a show about Phil Spector too.
Yeah, that fucking crazy fucker.
Ooh, that's a crazy ass story.
Dusty old bitch.
And that kind of started that whole case that eventually resulted in, spoiler alert, him being convicted of murder.
Yeah.
Now some of the websites and things like that count down the victims of the curse, they try to strengthen the connection between them by saying that Phil Spector was Buddy Holly's producer, but he was not. So really the only connection is he was also in the music business and he did some bad shit on February 3rd, which was the date of the crash. And somebody mentioned Jim Croce earlier on, and he is also usually considered in the expanded universe curse, if you want to call it that. But I feel like he's generally only dragged in because he also died in a plane crash. Like, he was 30 years old.
Well, shit, throw Randy Rhoads in there.
That's what I mean. It's like what the Leonard Skinner, didn't some of the Leonard Skinner guys, Stevie Ray Vaughan died in a plane crash? Like, like I said, a lot of them die in plane crashes because they travel on small planes a lot. And when I was watching like a documentary about this the other night, and they were talking about they all wanted to get on the plane, because the bus sucked. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna freeze my tits off on the bus. I'm not getting on a fucking airplane. No fucking way. Especially not one that dinky in that weather. But yeah, so Jim Croce died in 1973, also in a plane crash. He was 30 years old. But there's really no compelling connection between him and Buddy Holly, other than just your standard, Buddy Holly influenced everybody in rock and roll kind of thing. So if you're going to pull in everybody that died in a plane crash, like I said, the list would be like miles and miles long, because a lot of them did. And I mean, we talked about Waylon Jennings before, who you could argue, he lived, he didn't die right away or anything like that. I think he was 64 or 65 when he died. He died in 2002. And you'd think that if there actually was a curse, that he would probably be the first victim of it, or one of the first victims. But he wasn't. He actually got quite famous, like later on, and had a good career. But as I said, the last thing that he said to Buddy Holly, I hope your plane crashes. I hope your old plane crashes, he said. Fucked him up, like, pretty much for the rest of his life. And
when did he die?
2002.
Oh, okay.
2002.
At what age?
64.
Okay.
64, 65.
Actually,
well, he'd had like pretty chronic health problems.
All right.
I think he had like a lot of drug problems and stuff like when he was younger.
Yeah, I think of a guy who knew Buddy Holly fucking dying in 2002, being in his 70s or 80s by then. But I guess.
Well, no, because he was the same age. He was only 21.
Yeah.
Right. Buddy Holly was 22 and he was 21, like when the plane crash happened.
Yeah, these guys were younger than Elvis.
Yeah, they were babies essentially. So, but yeah, so in a way you could say he was kind of a victim of the curse too, just because of some ill-advised joke that he made that ended up coming true, and that kind of like fucked him up like pretty much for life. I feel like he never really got over it. Which, like I said, I understand that. I probably would have never gotten over it either. So yeah. So like I said, so yeah, all of these coincidences and shit like that, some of that shit's weird, right? But as with these kind of folkloric tales, I kind of feel like they seem creepier when you only use some examples and ignore other ones. You know what I mean? Because look, Waylon Jennings didn't die. Tommy Alsop didn't die. Like, he was the one that flipped the coin and lost to Ritchie Valens. He lived until he was in his 80s, and he was actually quite successful afterward. So there were other people associated with Buddy Holly who turned out just fine. Like, they didn't die, or like nothing happened to them. I found this little fact weird. I was on like a subreddit that was talking about the crash and talking about, why does Buddy Holly get talked about and not Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper as much? And they were talking about how much more influential Buddy Holly was and all this other kind of stuff. And somebody said something about his glasses, his iconic, like, horn-rimmed glasses, right? And obviously he was wearing them when the plane crashed and they got thrown into the snow. And they actually found them later, like after the snow had thawed. So they found them in the spring. And they got turned over to the sheriff's office of that county. And then they were put in like a sealed evidence envelope, and somebody forgot about them, and they were in there for like 21 years.
Man, worth a lot of money.
And then they found them like in the 80s. Like somebody was digging through some old shit and was like, holy shit, I think these are Buddy Holly's glasses. And, well, he did the right thing. Like, he gave them to his widow.
The family, yeah.
Like, Maria Elena, who was still alive at that time.
And I would have a documented trail of evidence from the police and everything like that. That shit could be auctioned off. You could get so much fucking money.
Well, she sold them in 1998 to Civic Lubbock Incorporated, which had, like, they have a display, like the Buddy Holly Center in Lubbock, Texas, because that's where he's from. $80,000. $80,000 is how much she got them for. Yeah. But that blew my mind that they just like sat in some evidence bag somewhere for 21 years. It's like fucking Buddy Holly's glasses. Because I don't think they found them at the time because it was all snow. Like, I don't think they found them until spring, and somebody found them and like turned them in.
Yeah, I don't think if you have anything of James Dean's car, his fucking Porsche Spider, and I think people have claimed that they have pieces of it, that they have the car.
There's supposedly a curse about that too.
Yeah, but I don't think that car exists. I think that car was thrown away back in antiquity.
I'd be interested to look into it because I have heard about the James Dean car curse also. That like supposedly people like use parts of it in their car and they died horribly, like in horrible crashes and stuff like that. But
evidently there's been some hoaxes where somebody has claimed to have gotten their hands on James Dean's fucking Porsche Spider. It was a race car. It was a badass fucking little race car. And that they rebuilt it and they got the engine block and the fucking serial numbers, but that car was just fucking crumpled.
Yeah, it was fucked up.
Yeah, you couldn't rebuild that car. You could have to get another car and fucking cut the serial numbers out of the fucking and put that on the and put that into the new frame. You had to force that car into being the James Dean's car. Some of the engine probably survived, but no, that car was fucking.
It was mangled
up and rolled, man. Fucking, it was just pieces.
It wasn't even really recognizable as a car. Honestly, it just looked like a tangled hunk of metal.
It was a lightweight, fast car for the time. It just somebody pulled out in front of him in the middle of the night and it appeared in the headlights, and he tried to go around it, went off the road, and fucking wiped it out.
Yeah, that fucking scares the shit out of me. You know what I mean?
He'd been racing it that day.
Yeah. Just goes to show shit can happen like in a fucking second. You never know.
And he was evidently pretty good.
Yeah.
James was pretty good, but those old headlights of the day, and fucking the speeds he was going, he was probably going over 100.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of times it doesn't matter like how good you are at something, like because fate in the world is bigger than you are. Yeah. And everybody can make a mistake. Someone else could make a mistake. It might not even be your fault, but you're still just as dead.
Yeah. Fucking, and he wasn't Southern. That was James Dean's fatal flaw. He wasn't Southern.
Was that what it was?
He's from the Midwest. Yeah.
I thought he was just driving too fast.
Had he been Southern, he'd have been all right.
He'd have jumped like the Dukes of Hazzard.
He would have bullshitted his way out of that shit, man. Yeah.
What, the devil would have sent him back or something?
Yeah, it'd have been something like that.
A
Southerner would have survived somehow. A Southern James Dean would have survived somehow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa is still open and they still have shows there. And I believe they do an anniversary, like every year on February 3rd, like they do an anniversary show, like a tribute show, which I thought was kind of nice. And they also, like people that are fans of like 50s rock and roll, they still do like pilgrimages, like to go there for the shows. And the crash site in the cornfield is also a little bit of a pilgrimage area. They have like a big pair of Buddy Holly glasses like on the sign that's like pointing toward it, like so you can go out there and see the site where the plane crashed, which is, you know, people leave flowers there and stuff like that, and people still do it, like nowadays, which is crazy. Like people are still doing it this many decades.
John's asking,
later.
didn't the Beastie Boy die in a plane crash?
Yeah, didn't he? I can't
know.
now. I can't remember. Like I said, it's when I was researching this and like looking into all the curse stuff, I was just like, Jesus Christ! Like, I knew a lot of rock stars had like died in plane crashes, but I forget sometimes like how many it was.
They fly a lot.
But like, yeah, they travel more than the average person,
and they're in private planes.
And they're in like little private planes, like little chartered planes and shit like that,
So
which are
and
nowadays are safe, but they're not as safe as like the big jetliners are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like the one time that I flew in a small plane, it was like some little puddle jumper that I took from I think I took from Denver to Santa Fe, or I was like, never again. Oh my god! And I think that was maybe a 6-seater, 8-seater. I don't even remember. So it wasn't even as small as this one that crashed.
I love small aircraft, especially small fucking rotor wing, fucking the UH-1 Huey. It's like flying in a fucking aluminum fucking beer can. You can fucking rock the fucking aircraft when it's on the skids. It's like you get in it and dude's in it, you can feel it sagging. You can feel it flexing.
Yeah, I don't like
you feel the tail flex, man.
Yeah, I don't like
it's
that.
fucking wild, man. Yeah, they're light, real lightweight. You're just you see them in the movies, you think that shit, you know, before I was ever in one, you know, you see all these war movies, you think that there's some kind of protection. No.
Nope. That's why you never get my ass on there.
Nope. Fucking bullets go right through it like they're not even there. Everything's aluminum and it's just fucking sheet. It's as thick as a fucking, you know, the aluminum sheet metal is like a fucking, well, it's sheet metal and aluminum, you know, it's like aircraft shit. And it's just paper thin. Paper thin and everything flexes. And fucking nothing seals and fucking wind blows through it. And it's just, you know, it's wild, man. It's as sturdy as a Volkswagen Bug. If you've ever, but most modern people have probably never been in one of those. Volkswagen Bug might even be sturdier. It's just rickety. But they're fun to fly in, man.
I've been in a couple of VW Bugs. My cousin had one.
Extremely loud. Got that fucking turbine jet engine on the back of it. And it's just right there. If you're in the back of it, I mean, it's just like right there above you. Fuel. The shit's fucking loaded with fucking jet fuel. Rockets and fucking guns hanging out the side of it.
You gotta be exceptionally brave or exceptionally stupid to get in one of those fucking things.
It's crazy.
Fucking death traps.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't even like flying in modern airplanes, and they're like a million times safer than the shit back then, but it's like, no way you get me in that shit.
Well,
no
fucking UH-1 had a long service
ground,
history, and they fucking knew what they were doing. It, for what it was, I mean, you didn't have any protection. It was a great fucking bird, though. It was very flexible and cost-effective and reliable, and they got shot down, and dudes survived the fucking wrecks all the time, you know?
Yeah, like
the fucking skid.
Yeah, walking away from a plane.
It would
crash.
do auto rotation, and if it lost power, it would just come down like a parachute with the fucking rotor go like that, and then the body would spin too, and the skids on the bottom were a big shock absorber, so it would just you could hit as long as it hit on the skid flat, you'd be all right, and everything would just crush around you. It could bounce, you know. Dudes lived. You just didn't want to get hit by the rotor. That was probably the biggest.
Well, yeah, that
was probably the biggest risk, is if you were somehow thrown out, and you somehow ended up getting caught up in a rotor as it was fucking hitting the ground, fucking spinning, you know. But usually, like I said, there wasn't any power. It was like what's called auto gyration, or things what they called it, auto rotation or auto gyration. It could act like a fucking propeller. It would come down.
High Desert says, Zach Baggins claims he has part of the James Dean death car in his Las Vegas museum. I saw it there. Of course, he could be full of shit. Yeah, I mean, who's going to check?
Car collectors have talked about
you could just put like a fucked up mangled piece of car in there and be like, James Dean's death car. You know what I mean? It's like shitty museums do that all over the fucking country.
Yeah, it's a Porsche Spider.
And it's Zach Baggins, so I wouldn't really
little Porsche.
put much stock in what he says.
It was a hot looking little Porsche, and you know they weren't that expensive for a race car, and James Dean could afford one. And fucking car collectors have been fucking lying about having pieces of that car, and no, that car's gone. I saw a program on it. They pretty much agree that that car was fucking thrown away after the accident because it wasn't a high value thing. It wasn't a collector's item. The idea that it was James Dean car is a modern concept. They didn't care if it was James Dean car. The car was fucked up. They just threw it away.
Like, well, it's broken. It doesn't work
It's gone.
anymore.
Yeah, and it was just pieces and crumpled up.
I was at some museum somewhere a long time ago, and they supposedly had Bonnie and Clyde's car, like with it all shot up and everything like that. But even back then, I was just kind of like,
that may be.
It could be, but it's like, it's probably full of shit.
That car was just shot up pretty bad. There's photographs of
But
it.
I mean, it'd be easy. Well, I don't know if it'd be easy, like nowadays, because it's an old ass car. But it's just like you could get your hands on a car like that and just shoot it full of holes yourself.
Yeah, but you'd have to. The thing is, though, is you could take the photos and compare the bullet holes.
Yeah, that's true. If you wanted to be a real stickler.
Right. And it was shot up with a lot of 30-06 because they were shooting at it with BARs.
Like, I wasn't really sure if it was the real one or not.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't that familiar with the pattern of I didn't know, like, where the bullet holes were supposed to be. So I was just like, could be, I don't know.
There were pictures of it at the ambush scene.
Yeah, I've
seen
the
bodies and everything. And fucking, you could figure it out.
Like I said, but you could fake that. You could fake that, too.
Be harder.
It would be harder, but...
Because you'd have to shoot it with 30-06 from a certain distance to get those same dimples going through that sheet metal. It'd be hard. I think it would be hard to fix it. Go try to find a fucking BAR or something 30-06. We could do 308, maybe.
I'm just saying there might be, it might be one of those kind of carnival things where there's a bunch of different ones that people have made over the years that, tour around different places.
Well, they were celebrities when that happened. It kind of follows that maybe they would have collected
that they would have kept it,
because they had Al Capone's cars and stuff.
I mean, possibly. Like I said, so I don't know if I actually saw the Bonnie and Clyde car, but they claimed it was the Bonnie and Clyde car, and I don't even remember what museum it was at. I think it was like part of a traveling. I don't think it was there all the time.
Oh, it wasn't an official museum somewhere against.
It was, but I don't remember what museum it was though. But I think it was, like I said, part of a traveling. I think it was like a lot of like gruesome shit, like from famous crimes. You know what I mean? But I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I don't even remember what else they had. They might have had some Lizzie Borden shit too. I can't remember. Yeah. Like their bedpans or something. It wasn't that, but it's, you know what I mean. So yeah. So like I said, this crash and like the shit that happened afterwards has always like fascinated me. I think the first I heard of it was, like I said, from the song, like American Pie. And then later on in the 80s, when I saw La Bamba, the movie with Lou Diamond Phillips, and that kind of got me back interested in it again, I guess. So I started like reading back more about it. Obviously that focuses way more on Ritchie Valens, which is cool. And then, the Buddy Holly story from 1978 is obviously about Buddy Holly. Nobody, as far as I know, has made a movie about the Big Bopper, which that's kind of a shame. Why didn't anybody make a Big Bopper movie? They made a Ritchie Valens movie. They made the Buddy Holly movie. No Big Bopper movie. Somebody needs to get on that. Unless somebody's made one and I don't know about it. I haven't heard about it. It'd be good. It'd be interesting. Like, they make biopics of... There's biopics of, like, all kind of people that are a lot less famous than he was. That's for sure. And, because he died the way he died, like, I feel like a lot of people would probably watch that. And I feel like maybe he's left out. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying. Somebody should make a Big Bopper movie. Get on that, Hollywood. All right. So, do we have anything else we need to add?
No, we'll be back Sunday. Or, excuse me, we'll be back Friday.
Yeah, Sunday. What's
Friday? Well, are we going to the club Friday?
No.
Okay, there isn't an Abyss.
No.
Night. Okay, then we'll be here for Friday.
No, Abyss is usually the first Friday of the month.
Okay.
So it's not for a few more weeks.
All right.
Weirdly, here's the weird thing. Well, because every third Saturday is supposed to be Memento Mori, right? Mm. I'm pretty sure this Saturday is the third Saturday, but I looked on the Axe Trap site and it still says Barbarella.
Okay.
So maybe because Saturday fell on August 1st, maybe they decided to move it back a week. I don't really know.
I don't know.
I mean, ask Dimitri to make sure, but like the Axe Trap site still has 80s night for this Saturday.
All right.
Not Memento. Like, not that it matters. It's the same night. It's Saturday night, but it's like it's a different DJ and different music slightly. So I was just wondering, because I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the third Saturday, but whatever. So yeah. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Like I said, this is a topic I've been wanting to do for a long time because I'm really interested in this kind of stuff. So, you know, I had a good time with it, and I hope you did too. Like I said, if you haven't seen the Buddy Holly story with Gary Busey, it's free on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's very good. And La Bamba was good too, but they don't have a Big Bopper movie, so we need to rectify that. All right, so we are going to wrap it up for this evening, obviously. So we'll be back Friday night for the Sidetrack show. We're not going out on Friday, so we'll be able to hang out and drink with you guys for as long as we feel like it. So that should be fun. Hopefully, you guys can join us for that. Have a good rest of your evening. Have a good day tomorrow, and we will see you guys again on Friday night. Good night.